Hey everyone, welcome back. This is Collapse Talk with your host Gabriel Marrero, and Happy New Year. I'm glad you could join me and just follow what's happening in the world. I do want to say thank you to those who have supported me all this time. Again, like I said, I've just recently graduated and I'm trying to take a new step with this program. So I'm very excited, especially now it's a new year and just a new stage of my life. I'm excited for what's to come, but again, most importantly, I'm here to, provide some commentary, maybe entertainment, whatever you want out of this. But yeah, this is Collapse Talk, and we have a lot to discuss. I mean, there's been a lot that's been happening. Of course, we went through the holiday season, Christmas and such. So Christmas and New Year's, it was nice to at least go to see my mom. That's mainly who I spend time with for the holidays. And some other family friends. And it's been interesting because I've been away for a while just to focus on school, and also because my car hadn't been in the best condition. So it's nice to go back, something that I have proven, that I graduated, something that people can say, okay, well, he's making some progress, or I don't know. I mean, I'm sort of like a fly on the wall sometimes in these social settings. So it was just nice to go back there and be like, oh, I graduated. You see, I'm, actually somebody, but it's whatever. I mean, I'm not planning to go back to Houston. I've been sort of upfront about that, or, I'm sort of shying away from it. I know now as, people start asking, oh, what's your next step? I'm just going to be straight up that I don't want to move back to Houston or Katy. So it's going to be interesting to see their reactions there. And also just to be more dedicated full-time to this program and to my research. But yeah, I mean, like I said, there's been so much that's been happening since last time I recorded. So we'll be discussing that. A lot of military actions. So this will be primarily focused on military maneuvers. This is, I'm looking forward to this episode, at least to comment on this and just other developments. Of course, tragic developments considering the ongoing genocide in Gaza. But yeah, before I continue, before I get further into it, I wanted to at least plug in my social media. You can follow me at CollapseTalkPod on Twitter, x.com, and other social media, Instagram, although I'm not as active. The YouTube as well, which I want to dedicate a little more videos and research into, and I'm doing my own independent research, so hopefully I can get something out soon. But yeah, thank you for tuning in, and let's just dive right into it. So yeah, where do I even start? I mean, this ongoing genocide in Gaza is certainly escalating, out into a more regional confrontation between Israel and the United States in the West, and the axis of resistance, as it's called, Iran and the Iran proxy militias, and as they call terrorists. But yeah, we just recently had a huge escalation of the United States and the UK bombing Yemen, the Houthi Ansarallah controlled regions of Yemen, and they have the Houthis. I'm gonna be interchangeable because Houthis, from what I understand, isn't the appropriate term for this group. It's more Ansarallah, but again, Houthis is more familiarized, so I'll be saying it both different terms. But this group in Yemen, which is essentially the de facto governing body of Yemen, they have stated that they are blockading the Red Sea, primarily Israeli affiliated and now American and British carrier, merchant cargo ships. They've stated that they're bombing, blockading it. I mean, they have seized some vessels, and they've struck with missiles and such. They are effectively blockading the port of Eilat. I forget I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's Eilat, one of the most profitable ports in Israel. Again, too many people are acting as though this blockade is just some random act of piracy and not a totally legitimate intervention in this ongoing genocide. I mean, again, like, Israel can't continue this. They have to face some sort of intervention. Of course, the United States, they're not going to do anything to stop it. They're just going to, unconditionally support it. In fact, they're now bombing Yemen, or at least they've made some strikes, and I feel like it's going to escalate further because it's just not going to be effective. But the United States doesn't know how to do anything except bomb people. So, yeah, this is an escalating situation. But yeah, I mean, this is, again, Israel has no intention of stopping, and they're just going to completely alienate themselves from the Arab nations. Of course, Saudi Arabia, all these other nations, they're going to continue to normalize, or at least attempt to normalize it. And what I mean is they want to stay in the good graces of the United States, so they're going to try to have some diplomacy between their governments in Israel. I feel that, however, the people on the ground are of a very different opinion. So there is that disconnect there. But yeah, Yemen is the poorest Arab nation. They've been experiencing civil war and Saudi intervention for almost a decade now. So I mean, this region has been destroyed. I mean, famine. The Yemen famine was already like some of the worst like conditions on the planet. Worst famine in the planet, and they're still, building the courage to stand up to the United States. Like, that's crazy. It just shows that we're fighting, or the United States is trying to go up against this motivated force, and it's just like we haven't learned anything. I mean, Biden started his administration with this embarrassing pullout and withdrawal from Afghanistan, and now it appears that he's going to end his presidency, because I don't see him winning this election. He's going to end his presidency, starting a new war with Yemen, and getting us further and further entrenched there, because you can just you can airstrike all the positions that you want. It's not going to change anything. I mean, what you got to do is put boots on the ground, like an actual occupation, which we don't have the stomach for another major invasion and occupation of a Middle Eastern country after the 20-year occupation that failed. And then even in Iraq, even though we have not as the same extent of occupation and deployment in Iraq, we have military bases there. They're getting attacked by militias, and also the bases that we have in Syria, illegally occupying Syria, they're getting attacked. So it's just this is the United States military, the imperial establishment is on the back foot, and they know this, and they're trying to this is what happens in the declining empire, where they're trying to just hit wherever they can, just flailing around with no direction, and it's just going to continue. I mean, again, I don't understand the thought process and the rationale behind this, because any basic understanding of military operations would understand that this is untenuous, that this is not tenable. And again, even Israel's performance in Gaza, it's already a defeat at this point. They're already starting to pull out troops, and Hamas has not been defeated, not even close. Israeli troops have been experiencing heavy casualties and armored equipment being damaged, and that's just in Gaza. Now they're trying to escalate a confrontation in Lebanon against Hezbollah, and now, even then, there's already some skirmishing, and what Hezbollah is doing is they're essentially sniping with anti-tank missiles, ATGMs. They're sniping radar positions, they're sniping outposts, like, and then they want to go into Lebanon. I mean, they had a missile strike or airstrike in Beirut to kill Hamas, like a deputy official, which they're denying, but like, who else would do this? Like, Israel is just like, I don't know, man. Like, Israel is not in a good position, and it's only getting worse, and they're making the situation worse for themselves. So, yeah, we'll just, like, who knows what's going to happen. I mean, again, anything can happen in like the next couple of weeks. Like, I'm making the recording now, and then like this week some other escalation could occur. So like, this thing is like moving pretty quickly, and I wanted to at least speak on, before anything, the American airstrikes in Yemen, just a little further, and just read some articles about this. Just essentially talking about the analysis here, because Biden has essentially just like made his own moves, without any congressional approval. Like, again, like the U.S. presidency just like can just have a military strike without just like we just started a war with Yemen. Of course, what they're trying to say is that no, these are terrorists. So because they're terrorists, they're not nationally, they're not recognized as like a legitimate state, power. So like, it's all these like legal like loopholes that they try to do to justify, overstepping their authority. Yeah, man, this is just crazy. Like, I try not to let like anything surprise me, but then like I see how like truly like depraved this political establishment is, and just like completely like no principles or morals. It's all about power. Power and status and wealth. Like, it's just like, I don't know, man. And then also to see people, in your normal day-to-day life defend this as well. It's just like, I mean, at this point, like, you can pretty much tell like somebody's like moral compass just based on like their positions in this conflict. Like, if they're in support of Israel or the U.S., bombing Yemen to protect Israel, like, it's kind of like, there's that self-reassurance. I'm like, okay, this is like a truly like horrible person. Like, it's not just me. But then you see that most of the general public, well, I shouldn't say most of the general public, because there's been more support for Gaza and Palestine. It's mainly among young people. But again, like this sort of conflict hasn't been in the mainstream consciousness until now, because now we can see it. And again, it's really hard to like, try to convince us, especially young people, that no, you see, Israel is doing, the right thing, and they're in the moral high ground. And then watching TikToks of like Israeli soldiers that they upload. So it's like Israeli soldiers are uploading this themselves, like just, dancing in like a bombed out school, or like I saw one video where like they were having like a sitcom sketch, like in this like abandoned house, pretending to be like Full House or something, like, oh, hey, can you do the dishes, please? And it's just like, they don't take, like, these Israeli troops don't take this seriously. It's a joke to them. Like, this is the mentality. And as I said, Hamas, as a guerrilla force, they're effectively like confronting Israeli troops, effectively, causing heavy casualties. I mean, like the Golani Brigade, I've read, has been, practically decimated, and they had to pull out. So that's why you see a lot of these troops, Israeli troops, like they have to like treat like, whenever they take like a kindergarten to school, they have to take it like, like that photo from Mount Suribachi in the Battle of Iwo Jima, those Marines raising the flag. Like, that's the way they have to do it. Like, oh, it's the kindergarten. The kindergarten has fallen. What a great victory. Like, that's all they can do. And also, again, they have to also parade like, supposedly surrendered combatants, which like are for the most part, and they've been identified as like medical personnel, the Palestinian medical personnel, or journalists, UN workers. Like, they've been identified, like, because these are most certainly non-combatants, because if they were combatants, they would not have surrendered. They would have died like fighting, either died fighting or just been outright executed by Israeli troops. So when you're seeing images of supposedly surrendered Hamas militants, you're most likely seeing captured male civilians. So again, man, like this is just purely depraved what's being posted. And right in the middle of this, I'll talk on further the the International Court of Justice proceedings about genocide. They don't care. I mean, they even said it themselves. No, the Hague will not stop us. Like they don't care. Like Israel is a rogue nation. There's all this concerns and talk about like Iran getting nuclear weapons. Like, dude, Israel is a far greater threat to global stability than Iran. Like straight up. Okay, and just to see everything that's being posted, it's just, man, like when I read casualty figures from Israeli troops and then I see these TikToks of them like making fun of making fun of Gaza, and I saw another video of them. They recently raided a university and they were like all dressed up in like the cap and gown, like, oh, he got his diploma at the University of Gaza. Like, it's just like, and these are Israeli soldiers, the so-called most professional soldiers in the world. It's just like, I don't care. Okay, when I read those figures, I feel no sympathy, none whatsoever. So it's just like, again, I don't like seeing anybody getting hurt. But then when you see like the barbarity from these Israeli troops, like I don't shed a tear for them. I don't. And I also wanted to clarify, at least, because I know I sound like really, I don't know, because like war to me is not good. And again, I don't want anybody to die in combat. It's just like, if you put yourself in this situation, you participate in occupation, and then the occupied resist that and fight back, and then you put yourself into this essentially like urban war, basically just like hellscape. It's like, I don't feel bad if you like get sniped or, get your leg blown off by an IED. Like, I really don't. Like, I just like, you put yourself into this, you join this army, you wanted to go in there to, cleanse it. Because, I mean, these troops, they know this is a genocidal campaign. So, yeah, who cares if you lose your leg? Like, that's the cost of you joining this fight. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I don't want to get too hung up on that, because I don't like talking like that about any human being. But again, it's just like, some things, it's just, you created this, you put yourself in this position, and now you're reaping what you sow. So anyway, so now, because I kind of talk at length, but now I want to talk about this article from The Guardian. It's this opinion piece from Mohammed Bazi, and his essential interpretation of these attacks, or these airstrikes that were made in Yemen, and now there have been a couple more. So like, this is just going to keep developing through the weeks, and hopefully doesn't escalate any further. But yeah, it's just like we're just repeating the same mistakes, and airstrike campaigns, they didn't work in Vietnam, they didn't work in Afghanistan, they're not going to work here. And this just, it's just a complete mess. So yeah, continuing with this article. So early on Friday, the U.S. and Britain launched military strikes against more than a dozen targets in Yemen controlled by the Houthi militia. The strikes were in response to more than 25 attacks by the Houthis on shipping in the Red Sea since November, a campaign instigated by the militia after Israel's invasion of Gaza. Western leaders, and especially the U.S. President Joe Biden, insist that they want to reduce the risk of the war in Gaza spreading to other parts of the Middle East, but the U.S.-led airstrike and naval strikes on Yemen are the most significant expansion of the conflict since Israel launched its devastating assault on Gaza after the 7th of October attacks by Hamas. Instead of avoiding a wider war, the U.S. and its allies are escalating regional tensions and adding fuel to the conflict that has already spilled to Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and the Red Sea. The conflagration could spiral out of control, perhaps more by accident than by design. Biden became the fourth consecutive U.S. president to order military strikes on Yemen, continuing 2 decades of failed U.S. and Western policies centered on bombing, counterterrorism operations, and support for a dictator in the Middle East's poorest country. Washington appears almost eager to repeat its mistakes. Years of bombings by U.S. allies during Yemen's long civil war have failed to dislodge the Houthis or persuade them to change course. In fact, the Houthis became stronger after each military confrontation. So, yeah, that's at least the beginning of his assessments here. again, it's like, it's insanity. Yeah. Did I ever tell you the definition of insanity? Like, it's just keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, and it's not working. It hasn't been working. I mean, they tried to use, Saudi Arabia as a proxy to, do regime change, and it didn't work. And then now the U.S. is going to try to get involved, which, I mean, like the only effective way to do it, even though it's not going to work, is to put boots on the ground. But you would need like hundreds. Because Yemen is a mountainous region, desert mountainous region, so sending troops in there would not be easy. A lot of casualties. You would need to deploy like thousands of troops, and the U.S. public is not ready for that. I mean, we're already experiencing the U.S. military experiencing recruitment problems. So like, yeah, man, like this is like, I don't know what they're expecting, what the U.S. is trying to do here. This is just a mess of like, they said they didn't want the war to expand, but then like you just started a new war with Yemen. I mean, of course, from the Yemen perspective, they've been at war with us from the start because we've been supporting and supplying weapons and such for their genocide. I mean, you could say that the Yemen casualties, you could characterize that as a genocide also. Yeah. So let me see a little further. Okay, I'm just going to read a little further here. Since the 7th of October, Hezbollah and Israeli forces have engaged in almost daily exchanges of fire across the Israel-Lebanon border, with Hezbollah saying it is trying to keep some Israeli military resources tied up from the Gaza front. Before the U.S.-British strikes on Houthi targets in Yemen, the Biden administration was most worried about a full-blown war erupting between Israel and Hezbollah. Meanwhile, Iran-backed militias in Iraq and Syria have carried out 130 drone, rocket, and missile attacks on U.S. troops in those two countries since mid-October, injuring 66 soldiers. On January 4th, the U.S. killed the commander of an Iraqi militia in an airstrike in Baghdad, saying he had been involved in planning attacks on U.S. troops. That airstrike angered the Iraqi government and accelerated calls for Iraqi factions to expel about 2,500 U.S. troops who are still based in Iraq to help fight Islamic State. And now we're actually there's just a released report that we're deploying more troops into Iraq, supposedly to fight ISIS. And even the U.S., I mean, the Iraqi prime minister, he's now trying to, call for a withdrawal of troops. Dude, Iraq hates us, man. We're losing Iraq. And I don't know what the U.S. is planning to do, because if the region explodes, we're what? We're just gonna start deploying all these hundreds of thousands of troops? It's not possible. It's not possible. The U.S. public is not gonna tolerate it. And what? We're gonna start drafting people again? No way. I don't even know what he's planning. Unbelievable, man. So continuing, Washington's unwavering support and billions of dollars in arms shipments to Israel are straining other U.S. alliances in the region. It's notable that two of the U.S.'s closest allies in the Arab world, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, have resisted joining an international naval coalition assembled by the Biden administration last month to confront the Houthis and protect shipping in the Red Sea. Saudi leaders are eager to preserve a tenuous truce with the Houthis, and they are aware of the broad support for Palestinians and anger at Israel's actions across the Arab world. Yemenis in particular have a long history of supporting Palestinian aspirations. Continuing. Yemen's civil war has been a complex conflict for years, with the rulers of Saudi Arabia and Iran backing different sides, but it escalated dramatically in September 2014 when the Houthis marched into the capital, Sana'a, and threatened to overrun the rest of the country. In March 2015, Saudi Arabia, with U.S. weapons and intelligence support, led a coalition of Sunni Arab states to intervene in the war, trying to dislodge the Houthis and restore Yemen's internationally recognized government to power. Despite a blockade and thousands of airstrikes, the Saudi-led alliance failed to force the Houthis from Sana'a. The Houthis essentially won the war, and they reached a UN-brokered ceasefire in 2022 with Saudi Arabia, although the two sides are still negotiating a permanent truce. Last March, after negotiations facilitated by China, Iran and Saudi Arabia agreed to restore diplomatic relations and de-escalate tensions. That deal paved the way for a wider agreement over Yemen. For the U.S. and Britain, that history should serve as a cautionary tale. The regional power they support spent years trying to destroy the Houthis, only to be ground down and forced to negotiate a settlement. So, yeah, man. So that's at least, just like a preliminary assessment. And it's just interesting that they brought up, that sort of diplomatic, agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Because again, if escalations continue to flare, because Saudi Arabia does not, even though they're trying to toe the line and, stay on the good side of the U.S. and Israel, they do not want Yemen to become a ground war or, even, other escalations, because that's just going to kind of ruin all the progress that they've made. Because peace is good for business, China wants peace, Russia wants peace. Iran and Saudi Arabia, they want peace. But when it comes to the West, especially with our military-industrial complex, peace is bad for business. So, in a lot of ways, like even though they're saying one thing to us, the public, that, we're trying to like de-escalate the situation or, trying to find a diplomatic route, like they don't care if this explodes. Because then, look, our defense contractors and we can start selling more weapons. And it's just like, that's the whole business plan. They want further destabilization, even if they're going to lose. Like, it's just like, it makes no sense. You try to think that like, even if they're bad, they at least are having some rationale behind it. But it doesn't seem like that. It's just like, they just want chaos. I don't know. It's crazy. There's like higher powers at play here that it's just like, how do you make any sense of this? But yeah, the Houthis have been in control for some time. They're the de facto government of Yemen. They control the major centers, the urban centers, the capital. So it's safe to say that they are the main governing body. We even with this peace agreement that Iran and Saudi Arabia made, we declassified the Houthis, or Ansar Allah, as a terrorist group. But now we're reclassifying them, or at least Biden wants to do that, because they're the only power that's taking any military material steps to intervene in this genocide. Like I was listening to some liberal, or Vash. He recently made a video calling out Hassan and the Houthis, saying that they're like Nazis. Just completely devoid of the fact that this all started because of Israel's genocidal campaign. Okay? And not even then. The ships that are passing through the Red Sea, stating that they have no contact with Israel, they're doing just fine. So, at least now, they're announcing that they're going to attack British and American cargo ships because British and U.S. military bombed them. So, yeah, I don't know, man. It's just like, again, the U.S. and the West can do whatever it wants. It doesn't have to justify anything to anybody. And anybody who resists this, imperialism is a terrorist. Like, you're a terrorist because you resisted my imperialist, genocidal actions. So, who knows, man? Again, when they announced this operation, this coalition, which pretty much is going nowhere because all these European countries, they're saying they don't want to be part of it. It's mainly the U.S., the U.K., and then maybe some not even true naval support, but just mainly officers, officer support, and even the Seychelles, just a completely random country there, and then they're still, even with the U.S. and the U.K., they're having problems with deployments and morale, and yeah, it's just so disjointed. They call it Operation Prosperity Guardian, so it's just crazy. Yeah. Again, just makes no sense to me. It just makes no sense what their planning is. They're going to escalate this war, and then what? You're just going to keep airstriking one of the poorest countries on the planet, that, very clearly has no intention of backing down. Again, like they just made these airstrikes, and then like there were Yemenis like protesting, like demonstrating, like I think I read one report like almost 1 million. So it's just like they have strong spirits, and they're not going to go anywhere. And the only way you can effectively stop them is to invade them, which is going to be a disaster. Yeah, it's just like crazy. So that's at least here, or this is one assessment of it. But I want to read a little further, talking about Biden, because he kind of just like ordered this strike, and there's questions of whether he violated his authority there. So just reading from Al Jazeera. Just on like whether or not this is like an overstep of presidential authority, because I mean, an airstrike is an act of war, and like it's just like he didn't run this by Congress. Like they're talking about like, well, yeah, he's the lesser of two evils. We got to have because if Trump is in power, he'll be a dictator, and then like of course liberals, they support this action. Like that, it's just crazy. So anyway, let's read from Al Jazeera. So the United States launched military attacks on sites operated by the Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen on Thursday, targeting its military infrastructure. The U.S. Air Force said in a statement that it had, quote, executed deliberate strikes on over 60 targets at 16 Iranian-backed Houthi militant locations, including command and control nodes, munition depots, launching systems, production facilities, and air defense systems, end quote. U.S. President Joe Biden said the joint strikes with the U.K. were meant to demonstrate that the U.S. and its allies, quote, will not tolerate, end quote, the Houthi attacks on shipping in the Red Sea. The U.S. raid, supported by Canada, Australia, Bahrain, and the Netherlands, marked the first major U.S. military response to Houthi attacks on shipping bound for Israel or owned by companies with any affiliations with Israel. The threats posed by Houthi attacks on global shipping has become serious enough to cause major companies such as Maersk to suspend shipping in the Red Sea. Several Democratic and Republican lawmakers have strongly criticized the move, accusing Biden of violating Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution. So what does Article 1 of the Constitution say, and has it been broken? So they're reading here the Constitution. Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution requires that war be authorized by Congress. In the lead-up to this week's strikes on Yemen, Biden notified Congress on the strikes but did not seek authorization. The article has long been understood to be a mechanism for checking and regulating the president's power to wage war. The hotly debated Section 8 of Article 1 assigns Congress the authority to declare war, stating that, quote, Congress shall have the power to declare war, end quote. The precise section of the article that requires explicit congressional approval for military action is the third clause of Section 10, which states, quote, no state, without the consent of Congress, lay any duty of tonnage, keeps troops, or ships of war in times of peace, enter any agreement or compact with another state, or with a foreign power, or engage in war unless actually invaded, in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay. I know that sounded weird, but this is like 18th century language, so yeah. Let's see further. What the U.S. lawmakers have said. So Congressman Pramila Jayapal from the Democratic Party called the airstrikes, quote, an unacceptable violation of the Constitution in an X post on Friday. And this is what she said, her tweet. This is an unacceptable violation of the Constitution. Article 1 requires military action be authorized by Congress. Continuing further, here from Congressman Cori Bush, her tweet, and she's adding the president. So at PUDIS, can't launch airstrikes in Yemen without congressional approval. This is illegal and violates Article 1 of the Constitution. The people do not want more of our tax dollars going to an endless war and the killing of civilians. Stop the bombing and do better by us. And then, of course, she got fact-checked, community noted by, I don't know who, but they're saying here, the community note, Congress has acknowledged the inherent executive power of the president to take military action in response to acts of terrorism, in both the War Powers Resolution and the Joint Resolution passed by Congress. So, of course, somebody had to step in and be like, well, actually, because this is an act of terrorism, we're actually justified to have an endless war, which, of course, that was the criticism of these War Power Act, resolutions, saying that this is never going to end. There's just going to be endless war. We just declare somebody a terrorist and then you can just bomb them. It's just like, it's endless war. Okay, this was passed in this is passed in 2001 and it's 2024. Okay, like when does this end? Like 23 years of war? Like, that's insane. Like, but of course, anything they do is just justified. So, yeah, and of course, this is from, these are Democrats saying this. So, it's nice to see at least that there are Democrats being principled and standing up about this. Of course, it's mainly like the progressive, squad types. So, yeah, so continuing here. Other progressive lawmakers, including Rashida Tlaib, Mark Pocan, and Ro Khanna, also took to social media to denounce the military action as being in violation of Article 1. However, it was not just Democrats who objected to recent airstrikes. Republican Mike Lee shared Ro Khanna's post in agreement. Quote, "The Constitution matters regardless of party affiliation," he wrote. Here, Republican Texas Congressman Chip Roy wrote, quote, "I am potentially fine with striking Yemen to defend critical shipping channels and response to aggression." Continuing, "Under what authority was this carried out?" So it's like, I agree with, bombing Arabs, but we have to go through the proper channels first, It's just like, yeah, anyway. Okay, so I'm gonna continue now with this article reading about the War Powers Act. So the War Powers Resolution, more commonly known as the War Powers Act, was passed by Congress in November of 1973. The act requires the president to inform Congress within 48 hours of military action and requires the termination of military action within 60 days of its commencement if Congress has not officially declared war or authorized military action. In September 2023, the New York Times carried out a survey of presidential candidates on this issue. Biden responded that if he was elected in 2024, he would seek congressional authorization to start a major war, but added he believed he has the power, quote, "to direct limited U.S. military operations abroad without prior congressional approval when those operations serve important U.S. interests," end quote. This stands in contrast to Biden's stance in 2007 when, during Q&A with the Boston Globe, he said, quote, "The Constitution is clear, except in response to an attack or an imminent threat of attack, only Congress can authorize war and the use of force," end quote. So, again, power changes people. You say one thing. I mean, again, like there was a tweet that he made and people were calling him out where he said, "I will only use military force as a last resort." And of course, what happened? We just went straight to bombing Yemen. Let's see. So that's essentially this Al Jazeera article about the overreach from Biden and this escalation of bombing Yemen purely because they're the only power taking a stand against Israel's genocide. And it's also interesting that they bombed Yemen on the same day when the proceedings for the ICJ were starting. South Africa's opening statements on this. So I don't know. It's just like, it feels like it was sort of a message that like, this is what happens. It doesn't matter what the rulings are. If you step between us, like this is what happens. We're gonna bomb you. I mean, even the United States, we have a policy now where if any U.S. military, not even military personnel, just any American that is tried at The Hague for war crimes, crimes against humanity, we have the power to invade the Netherlands. Like that's just like that is the message. Again, we have this international proceedings and this law, but if the U.S. doesn't support it, then nothing happens. It's just, yeah. So that's at least, some opening assessments. I do want to continue at least on, the Red Sea, because this is important for, again, commerce. I mean, so many now ships are being diverted. across, the Cape of Good Hope, in Africa. So that's going to have an effect on costs, shipping costs, and even like, energy, because I believe it was Qatar, I just read, Qatar has essentially suspended natural gas shipments to Europe because the costs are too much, and that's going to have a severe effect. So like Europe is in for a tough winter. Because and it's already a bit of a powder keg. There's already protests happening. It's just like, again, all these dominoes are just starting to fall, and like this is setting up for an explosion, really. So who knows what could happen. So reading at least from CNN, and I'm kind of like trying to like go in between different sort of outlets and their comments about this conflict that's escalating. And Al Jazeera has been standing out as like being like one of the better sources. Well, it's not the best, but at least when it comes to Gaza, they're actually like covering it. Al Jazeera was like the only major news outlet providing a live stream of South Africa's opening statements. Like you couldn't find it anywhere else. I was even trying to look for articles on it for like, mainstream like CNN websites or MSNBC, because you would think that like one of the most consequential genocide hearings since the Holocaust, that would be major news, especially for one that's for Israel being accused of genocide, and it was nowhere to be found. But of course, when Israel started making their comments, that's when there was coverage. So it's just completely devoid of, it's just completely hypocritical. Again, that's sort of the reason why I prefer to be independent. Like I was actually talking with my grandpa, because he was like, congratulating me for graduating, and he's old school. He's an old Dominican guy, so there's just certain things that like I can't really explain to him. But he was like, "Oh, you should do CNN." I'm just like, I love my grandpa, so I'm just like, "Oh yeah, for sure." But I was also trying to like put that into his head of like, there's also internet, podcasting stuff that you could do. It's a different media landscape now. But it's just so funny to me that, and even that they, again, I'm. It's nice to think that some of my family members are encouraging me to join these like corporate workspaces, but it's just like I'm not cut out for that. I'm not, and they don't even want me. It's like I'm just like I'm not going to fit in there, and it's very clear that these corporate workspaces don't want a person like myself for whatever reason. I don't know. So it's just kind of funny, like trying to be like, oh, okay, thank you, yeah. But it's just so funny. Like, yeah, join CNN. Like, yeah, it's so easy. Just join CNN. Just send an application. So anyway, but yeah, at least now, because I'm going to read a CNN article about their writings of the Houthis and the Yemen, or the Red Sea blockade. And this is a little recent, so yeah. So reading here. Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi rebels are stepping up their strikes on ships in the Red Sea, which they say are revenge against Israel for its military campaign in Gaza. In a significant escalation, the United States and the UK launched airstrikes against multiple Houthi targets in Yemen after the Biden administration and its allies warned the group would bear the consequences of its repeated attacks. The Houthi attacks have forced some of the world's biggest shipping and oil companies to suspend transit through one of the world's most important maritime trade routes, which could potentially cause a shock to the global economy. The Houthis are believed to have been armed and trained by Iran, and there are fears that their attacks could escalate Israel's war against Hamas into a wider regional conflict. So, again, it's very important when you read like these Western media outlets, because the language is very important here, and it's just again they're putting the onus, the blame on the Houthis and other groups like Hezbollah and Hamas for the conflict. It's like, oh no, there's fears of a wider conflict because of these terrorist groups, not because of Israel's occupation and their genocide. So again, now I read this, of course, it's important to get a spectrum of different outlets and their assessments and analysis of global situation. But again, like, it's important, at least, as a leftist and a commentator, to apply your own critical analysis of this, because again, the language that they're using is very important here. And yeah, it's just, it's very deliberate. It's very deliberate. So just continuing, at least, because this article is sort of going over the same things that I've been saying from the other articles. At least here, this is just CNN, what they're saying, the reasonings for these attacks on the ships. Okay, so why are the Houthis attacking ships in the Red Sea? While through a combination of geography and technology, the Houthis may lack the capabilities of Hamas and Hezbollah, their strikes on commercial vessels in the Red Sea may inflict a different sort of pain on Israel and its allies. The global economy has been served a series of painful reminders on the importance of narrow stretches of sea, which runs through the Bab el-Mandeb Straits off the coast of Yemen to the Suez Canal in northern Egypt, and through which 12% of global trade flows, including 30% of global container traffic. In 2021, a ship called the Ever Given ran aground in the Suez Canal, blocking the vital trade artery for nearly a week, holding up as much as $10 billion in cargo each day, and causing disruptions to global supply chains that lasted far longer. There are fears that the Houthi drone and missile attacks against commercial vessels, which have occurred almost daily since December 9th, could cause an even greater shock to the world economy. 4 of the world's 5 major shipping firms, Maersk, Hapag-Lloyd, CMA, CGM Group, and Evergreen, along with oil giants like BP, have paused shipping through the Red Sea amid fears of Houthi attacks, moves that cause oil and gas prices to surge. The attacks could force ships to take a far longer route around Africa and cause insurance costs to rocket. Companies could pass on the increased costs of moving their goods to consumers, raising prices again at a time when governments around the world are struggling to tame post-pandemic inflation. The Houthi strikes could be intended to inflict economic pain on Israel's allies in the hope they will pressure it to cease its bombardment of the enclave. Championing the Palestinian cause could also be an attempt to gain legitimacy at home and in the region as they seek to control northern Yemen. It would also give them an upper hand against their Arab adversaries, Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, who they accuse of being lackeys of the U.S. and Israel. So, again, this thing about Western chauvinists, when they meet like a group like the Houthis, they treat them as like, oh, well, you see, they're just like sandal wearing, Arabs in the desert. They're just violent. They just attack at will. It's like this is smart. Okay, this is a smart move by the Houthis. And again, this is the thing about Western chauvinists. They don't respect their adversaries. So when they get punched in the nose and there's like a lot of blood, it's like, oh my God, like it's such a shock. So the Houthis, they understand that the West is decadent, and they understand that if you hit the West with their dollars, and their economy, that is how you bring them to the table. Because again, like, you start affecting gas prices. Like, it's funny actually. Like the day that they announced this coalition, the Prosperity Guardian, I was just like driving around and I noticed the gas prices. They jumped like 20 cents. Like, it was crazy. I'm like, wow, just overnight, it's 20 cents. I wonder what happened right as we started a war with Yemen. And, of course, it's the winter right now, so gas prices are a bit low. But I'm just going to be like in shock to see what prices are in the summer, especially the longer this blockade continues. But yeah, the Houthis, again, one of the poorest nations in the world, okay? They are bringing global trade to a standstill using like cheap missiles and drones. Like, again, like this is a sort of like a revolution in naval doctrine now. We're kind of seeing how unimportant these like large, surface fleets are. Not that it isn't important to have a surface fleet, but it's just like, I was reading another report that, because again, like our equipment and our munitions, especially like anti missile and drone munitions, it's expensive. So it's like it's sort of like a siege, but like with dollars. Like, again, like, you can bomb them all you want, but like their equipment is super cheap. They can just build it quickly and just send it out. And like, they're not, I mean, the U.S. is not going to risk, losing a ship or damaging a ship. Again, if a ship gets hit by a drone, even if it didn't kill anybody, that would still be like a huge morale shock, because it's just like, because we think we're so invincible, and then like somebody, an actual underdog, is able to fight us. It's just like, it's such a shock to us. Like, what? Like, again, when they announced the coalition, like, there were so many like NATO people like posting online like, oh, well, we're about to, the Yemens are about to find out, the Houthis are about to find out why Americans don't have free healthcare. like that's something to be proud of. Like, it's just crazy, and not even like, we're not even being that effective. Like, this is gonna be an embarrassment. Like, really. Like, again, like the Houthis, like I was seeing another report or like an interview. I'm not sure if it was the actual chairman for the Houthis, but an important figure. And he's saying essentially like, oh yes, finally we're having a direct confrontation with the U.S. Praise Allah. Like, thank you. Like they're happy to be in a direct conflict with the U.S. Okay, and like, this is an enemy that we're just gonna like bomb into submission. Like, they don't care. Like, yeah. It's just like, I don't. Again, like like, this is going to be a mess. The further this escalates, the longer this drags out, and the more of a hit this is on the economy. It's just sort of crazy. So, that's at least CNN. And again, they were talking about the effect on the economy. Different shipping companies suspending their travel through the Red Sea. I wanted to read at least another bit about the economic effect already. Just reading about the economic costs. So this is concerning Volvo and Tesla and their electric vehicle production. It's already being affected by this, and this is the early stages. So like, this is going to drag out further, and this is going to get more painful economically. So this is from the electric.co. Here, Volvo has joined Tesla in stopping its EV production in Europe due to the threat of violence from Iran-backed Houthi fighters attacking commercial ships traveling in the Red Sea. As Electric reported yesterday, Tesla has halted its Berlin Gigafactory for about 2 weeks from January 29th to February 11th due to the lack of components as a result of the Red Sea blockade. Tesla and Volvo are among several companies having to direct ships away from the Red Sea amid the threats of attack, the Automotive News Europe reports. Volvo said it would halt production at its factory in Ghent, Belgium, for 3 days after rerouting ships to avoid potential violence that has delayed the delivery of gearboxes, a Volvo spokesperson told Automotive News Europe. The Ghent factory currently builds its fully electric XC40 and C40 with the EX30 EV added next year. Productions and deliveries coming from its other European plants in Gothenburg, Sweden, are not affected. What's happening is that the Iran-backed Houthis have declared a blockade on the Bab al-Mandeb Strait near Yemen in response to Israel's attacks on Gaza. It's a tiny chokehold in the Red Sea and a control point for all shipping between the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea via the Suez Canal. The group has stated its intentions to attack any commercial ships traveling through the strait into the Red Sea. Since October, the group has attacked several commercial vessels with drones and ballistic missiles and seized what they said was an Israeli cargo ship, reports the BBC. Attacks in the Red Sea have jumped 500% in the past month, with now companies taking extreme measures to avoid risks. Global shipping companies in one of the busiest shipping lanes have had to redirect or halt shipping altogether. Turning ships south to travel around Africa takes much longer than cutting through the Suez Canal. Rerouting adds 10 days and $1 million in fuel costs to a journey from Asia to Europe. So, yeah, I mean, again, this is already starting to have an effect on like automobile production. And yeah, man, like this is just going to keep on dragging on, and the Red Sea is not going to open up, and this is going to stop when Israel stops their genocide in Gaza. So yeah, this is turning into this is sort of like the Gulf of Tonkin, right? Like it's like this one little confrontation that was already sort of under suspicious pretexts, but then it's just going to keep escalating and escalating, and the only way to further, at least from the U.S. perspective, to further confront this is with ground deployment. Now, whether or not we have a ground deployment in Yemen, that is, I mean, who knows? I mean, again, like Biden is desperate for any sort of win, and of course, the way to like at least win a re-election is to start a new war. So I don't know, man. I mean, again, as I was saying further, there's questions of his powers to start a military confrontation or to deploy military force, and that's going to cause problems with Congress. Because I don't think even Congress wants a ground deployment in Yemen, like, because they understand that's going to be a mess. So it's just like, I don't know what the thought process is here. We're just bombing this country randomly, and this could benefit the Houthis even more, because I mean they're not in full control of Yemen, but again, like they're they can position themselves as like, we're the defenders of the Palestinian cause, which of course is going to appeal to all Arabs in that region. It's just like, I mean, the Houthis are probably going to end up stronger than they started. Like, this is just, you can bomb them, but it's like, that's just going to make them even more galvanized. Yeah, man. It's just crazy to think about. And then, of course, there's, the Gaza, conflict that's unfolding. And again, even then, because of course there's the criminal justice, the ICJ hearings, which are mainly like the opening provisional like hearings, so not the real actual trial. So we're yet to see that whether or not the court is going to continue with the trial. But yeah, it's just like it's so fascinating that like Israel can say with a straight face that this isn't a genocide. This is not a genocide. We're supplying aid, and we're doing all this, to prevent civilian casualties. And then like within the same day, there's a video of like thousands of civilians, trying to get the point, trying to line up for food, for the little humanitarian aid that they can get, and already they're getting shot at. Again, Wael Dawood, the journalist, Al Jazeera journalist. I mean, he lost his son recently. His whole family has been decimated. It's just crazy. And then again, of course, Israel's the prime minister, again, in his speech recently said, nobody will stop us, not even The Hague. So just a clear, like, disdain for any sort of international rule of law, which of course, hey, this is supposedly the only democracy in the Middle East, but they don't care for the genocide court. Again, not even making a serious ruling. Like they're already just coming out saying like, we don't care what you say, even though you're most likely gonna vote in our favor. I don't even know what's gonna happen. It's just fascinating to me to see just how truly evil like our establishment is. Like, I was saying, at least like last time, and I kind of regret saying it, honestly, because I was saying that somehow the U.S. is restraining Israel's actions to a degree, even though there are still, just killing people. But I do regret saying that, because it's just like this past month, like, I mean, like when I said that, like literally the next day as I was editing, like there was reports of like execution of civilians. So it's just like they're already starting to like mass murder people, like, sniping people. Like it's just like, I really didn't want to think that this administration was as evil as this, but like, yeah, it's just like there's no humanity whatsoever. It sometimes really is just astonishing to see like how depraved and evil our political establishment is, and then like I have to vote for this asshole. Like I have to vote. Like, again, this election is going to come up, and I'm going to be straight up. When people ask me if I'm voting for Biden, like, no, I'm not. I'm not voting for him. I didn't vote for him the first time. And again, people are going to get hostile. Like, a lot of liberals are going to be very hostile. Again, because you didn't vote the right way. Oh no, you didn't vote in my, specific way. But no, man, it's just like, this is done. It's like, you guys didn't want to fix anything. You kept doing the same bullshit, didn't fix anything, and now you're reaping what you sow. I didn't start this. I didn't, this is crazy. Man. This election is going to suck. It's just crazy to think about. But yeah, so at least, talking about the Houthi blockade of the Red Sea, I do want to continue further, of course, with the ICJ, South Africa genocide case. And yeah, at least, I'm going to read like two different outlets about this. So reading from the BBC about this case, and I'm just going to be intrigued to see like the sort of language and how they present this. So here from the BBC, reading here, what is South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the ICJ? So here, and again, it's interesting to note that no major Western outlet covered the proceedings from South Africa. They didn't broadcast anything that they said because it's so apparent. So again, here, the BBC, the International Court of Justice is being asked to consider whether Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza. South Africa brought the case to the court. Israel has strongly rejected the allegations, calling it baseless. Even the United States, they're just saying there's no basis. It's fact. There's no facts whatsoever. It's just like no shame whatsoever from this establishment, from this administration. Just complete unconditional support for this very obvious genocide that's occurring. Like, these people are going to burn in hell. Like, like Henry Kissinger just died, and like now they're the new Kissingers. So what is genocide and what is the case against Israel? So here, South Africa alleges Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinians in the wake of Hamas's October 7th attack. Hundreds of Hamas gunmen crossed into the Gaza Strip into southern Israel, killing 1,300 people, mainly civilians, taking about 240 hostages back to Gaza. Since Israel launched its military campaign against Hamas in response, more than 23,000 people, mainly women and children, have been killed in Gaza, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. Again, this is the language that they're using. Look how they say, not that it is a fact that the majority of casualties have been women and children. They're saying, no, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. Again, very, very biased language here. And evidence, continuing, and evidence submitted by South Africa claims, quote, acts and omissions by Israel are, quote, genocidal in character because they are intended to bring about the destruction of a substantial part of the Palestinian national, racial, and ethnic group, end quote. This refers both to what Israel is actively doing, such as carrying out airstrikes, and what it is allegedly failing to do, such as, according to South Africa, preventing harm to civilians. Again, they're saying allegedly they're, preventing harm. Again, like, this is just like, again, this is like the lowest point for Western journalism. Like, allegedly, Israel isn't doing what it can to ensure, the safety of civilians. So continuing, and the case highlights Israeli public rhetoric, including comments from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as evidence of genocidal intent. Under international law, genocide is defined as committing one or more acts with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. And these are the acts. Killing or causing serious bodily and mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, and imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Again, like, this is what is happening on the ground. Like, pretty much all the points here. But allegedly, right? Allegedly, Israel isn't doing what it can to prevent civilian casualties. Allegedly, the majority of the casualties are women and children, from the sourced from the Hamas-run health ministry. And again, those figures are conservative at best. So here, how has Israel responded to allegations of genocide? Israel has fiercely rejected South Africa's claim. Mr. Netanyahu said, quote, "No, South Africa, it is not we who have come to perpetuate genocide. It is Hamas. It would murder all of us if it could. In contrast, the IDF is acting as morally as possible." And again, like, you just turn on any basic like TikTok from the IDF. Like they're doing like the cool guy doesn't look at explosions bit, blowing up like homes and hospitals and schools. Just like, oh, look how badass we are. Again, because they're getting they're getting like really like screwed up, messed up, just from like the Hamas like IEDs and RPGs and snipers. So that's why they have to do all this like it's propaganda essentially, blowing up homes and schools, because they like, how can you it's like there's no other way to do it. Again, like that's the only way to effectively wage, like, I guess, a counter guerrilla operation, is like you have to kill everybody. Like that's the only way you can do it, which of course is like you're kind of proving the point that this is a genocide. So anyway, here Israel's military says it takes a raft of measures to avoid civilian casualties. These include airdropping flyers warning of imminent attacks, calling civilians' phones to urge them to leave targeted buildings, or boarding some strikes when civilians are in the way. So, again, like, oh yeah, we drop air droplets, or we airdrop flyers, and we call people to leave. But it's like that's not really. It's like you could probably just like stop the whole attack together, just like stop the whole war. That would certainly ensure, the safety of civilians. To stop attacking Gaza. Crazy. Again, it's just so fascinating when you hear people talking about Hamas, like they live among the populace. They use the people as human shields, but it's like, yeah, because that's where they live. Where do you think the Hamas is just going to go to some other random part of Gaza? Like, no, like this is their home. So of course they're going to live there. Like, what the fuck? It's just so stupid. It's like saying like, oh, again, the same mentality when Hamas attacked those kibbutzim surrounding Gaza. It's the same mentality. Like, oh, like, the Hamas could say the same thing. Like, oh, you see these IDF troops, they live among the civilian populace. It's like, yeah, because it's their home. Anyway, just complete hypocrisy. Right. Continuing. And the Israeli government has repeatedly stated its intention is to destroy Hamas, not the Palestinian people. A spokesperson for the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said Mr. Sunak believed South Africa's case was completely unjustified and wrong. Quote, "This legal action does not serve the court of peace. The UK government stands by Israel's clear right to defend itself within the framework of international law." It's just so funny, like all the powers that are standing in support of Israel are all these countries that have a history of genocidal occupation and colonialism. And then even Germany is now standing in defense of Israel. It's crazy. And then like Namibia came out saying like, and actually, it's a point of pride, I should say, that all these African countries now, global South countries that live with the aftermath and the horror and trauma of the colonialism from Europe and the United States. Now they're taking a stand and saying like, no, actually, you guys are fucking evil, and like you can't just pretend like you didn't do these things. So continuing. Okay, so continuing, right? So this is another segment. So can the court make Israel stop the war in Gaza? South Africa wants the ICJ to order Israel to, quote, immediately suspend its military operations in and against Gaza. So again, this is like, and I'm not an expert on these legal proceedings, but as I understand, this is mainly the opening statements where they're making their arguments to see whether this can go into court, whether or not the actual Genocide Convention is being violated. And that ruling should be made in a couple days or maybe in a week or so. But also they're pushing for provisional measures, right, to suspend the military operation. So continuing from the article, but it is virtually certain Israel would disregard such an order and cannot be made to comply. Rulings are theoretically legally binding on parties to the ICJ, which include Israel and South Africa, but in practice unenforceable. In 2022, the ICJ ordered Russia to immediately suspend military operations in Ukraine, but the order was ignored. So again, like, the only democracy in the Middle East is perfectly willing, and they've already stated it, that they are not going to abide by the Genocide Convention they've signed on to. Okay, this is a Genocide Convention that Israel is party to, and they're not going to listen to it. But they're a democracy. Crazy. Yeah, and then let me see a little further. So that's pretty much all I want to read at least, because again, this is just like a Western perspective on the court hearings. But they're already saying that like it could take years before like any sort of judgment is made. Again, like whether or not this is going to go to trial is still in question. But yeah, man, it's just like it's just crazy to see like the contrast between the South Africa presentation and the Israeli presentation, because the South Africa presentation isn't just this one single instance of the conflict, but they're pointing out the entire history of the occupation for 75 years. Like that's their point. Those are their points in their presentation based on historical reality. But then you listen to the Israeli presentation, and it's just like Hamas did this and Hamas did that, and that's why we're doing this because of Hamas. Like that's it. It's all just on Hamas. And even like there was rumors that they were going to have Alan Dershowitz, which of course like didn't happen, most likely because of the Epstein documents being released. But that would have been so funny to see him in a criminal court, the genocide court, trying to defend Israel. Epstein associate Alan Dershowitz. Like, yeah, great, yeah, that's a good look. My God. Again, and you can already read from this language here where they're like, allegedly they're not protecting civilian life, and allegedly the majority of casualties have been women and children. Like, it's just like, God, this is why I'm independent. Like, I can't stand corporate journalism. I can't stand it. So here, at least now, because we read a Western interpretation, now we're reading Al Jazeera, who actually covered South Africa's presentation. So here's what they're reporting, and the article is what is South Africa's 5-point ICJ argument against Israel. So reading now from Al Jazeera, who is actually going to do some real journalism on this subject matter. So here, right. So South Africa's landmark case against Israel for its war on Gaza began on Thursday at the International Court of Justice, the World Court, based in The Hague. Pretoria is accusing Israel of committing the crime of genocide in breach of the 1948 Genocide Convention. More than 23,000 people have been killed in Gaza since October 7th, according to the Enclave's health ministry. That includes nearly 10,000 children. In its 3-hour-long presentation to ICJ judges, the South African team, led by international law academic and barrister John Duggard, articulated the harrowing plight of Palestinians in Gaza who are trapped under siege, bombarded by continuous Israeli airstrikes, and attacked by a deadly Israeli military ground invasion. So already, you can see the difference in the language. Okay? Because like, not even for a single moment did the BBC article point out the actual real conditions that civilians are facing. Okay? Even if, they're trying to say, no, yeah, Israel is trying to protect civilian life, they could at the very least point out the actual, conditions that are being faced. And they didn't even bother to do that. So, but here, Al Jazeera is actually pointing out the realities on the ground. Yeah. So here, it could take years for the ICJ to reach a final judgment. But this week's initial proceedings are focused on South Africa's specific request for an emergency order against the continuing killings and destruction in the Gaza Strip. Experts say an interim sentence could be out in weeks. Adila Hassim, one of the advocates representing South Africa, said that it's not necessary for the court to come to a final sentence on the genocide allegations now, but that it could conclude that at least some of Israel's actions fall within the definition of the convention and thus intervene. So here are the 5 main genocidal acts that Hassim accused Israel of having perpetuated during the war. So the first point, mass killing of Palestinians. The first genocidal act is mass killings of Palestinians in Gaza. Hassim said, showing the court pictures of mass graves where bodies were buried, quote, often unidentified. She said Israel has deployed highly destructive 2,000-pound bombs in parts of Gaza that it has itself declared safe. More than 1,800 families have lost multiple family members, while some families do not have any survivors left, Hassim said. No one has been spared, not babies, and especially not children, she added. And again, the point that I want to point out about the 2,000-pound bombs, it's been revealed that majority of those bombings, because Israel tries to claim that, no, we're using precision weaponry, trying to prevent casualties. It has been found that they had no guidance systems at all, actually. Like, these were just dumb bombs. Like, they just dropped it. So it's very clearly not a surgical attack. I mean, you're using a 2,000-pound bomb. There's nothing surgical about that. It's just so, these people are evil, man. Like, this is evil. Again, the fact that anybody would take what they're saying seriously, like, what, you think somebody would do that? They would just lie? Just like, crazy to see how naive some people are. Yeah, continuing here. Bodily and mental harm. The second act, the second genocidal act, Hassim said, quote, is Israel's infliction of serious mental and bodily harm on the people in Gaza. Close to 6,000 people have been wounded and maimed, most of them women and children, in a place where the health system has collapsed, she added. Hassim cited the arrest of large numbers of Palestinians, including children, who were undressed and loaded onto trucks, going to unknown locations. The suffering of the Palestinian people, physical and mental harm, is undeniable. So yeah, there was a recent photo. And again, Israel posts this like themselves. Again, all these crimes that they're committing, they are posting it themselves because they have no shame whatsoever. Like, they have groups, so-called combatants, undressed in like this football stadium, lined up, and then they load them onto trucks. Like, even under normal circumstances, like, that's a very clear violation of like prisoner treatment. Again, like there's a huge contrast, okay? Because again, the Hamas prisoners, the prisoners held by Hamas, very clearly are treated well. They're fed well, again, not malnourished compared to Palestinians that have been released. They have been extremely malnourished. The Hamas prisoners, they're not being tortured, okay? Because if Hamas was truly as evil like ISIS, as they're trying to say, like, we wouldn't have to debate whether or not they're mistreating prisoners. Like, they would post it themselves. Because that's what, these truly like barbaric, groups would do. They post their torture and all sorts of horrific actions to spread fear and terror. So Hamas hasn't been doing that. In fact, they've been posting videos of the good treatment of prisoners. Yeah, man, it's just crazy to think about. And again, more hostages have been killed by Israel, the bombings, and then also they had like the 3 hostages who actually escaped and tried to surrender to Israeli troops. Like, they just fucking killed them. Like, it's just crazy. These people, these thugs, they're wild. Like, they're basically like wild dogs. Like, they're just like, they just want to go in there and kill people. They kill their own. It's just crazy. No discipline, no respect, nothing. So yeah, okay, this is the third point. Forced displacement and food blockade. Hassim said Israel has deliberately imposed conditions that cannot sustain life and that are calculated to bring about the destruction of Gaza through its forced displacement of most of the population. Hassim said thousands of families have been displaced multiple times, with 500,000 now having no homes to return to. She cited how Israel gave entire hospital orders to evacuate within 24 hours with no assistance in moving the injured or moving medical supplies. It did the same with large parts of northern Gaza, where more than 1 million have been asked to move at short notice. The order itself was genocidal. like it's actual, like literal ethnic cleansing. Like genocide isn't just killing them; it's displacement, ethnic cleansing. The plan is to push the population into the Sinai Desert. That they have no intention of allowing the civilian population to return. Right. So continuing, the lawyer said Israel has also blockaded food and water from the Strip, causing widespread hunger, and that it has removed the ability to distribute what is available by restricting the movement of aid workers. Hassim played a clip that showed hundreds of Palestinians running after a truck carrying aid into Gaza. Israel, Hassim added, has also deliberately imposed conditions denying Palestinians in Gaza adequate shelter, clothes, bedding, and other critical non-food items. She said there's no safe water to drink, clean, and cook, and that disease cases, including diarrhea, are soaring. She said more Palestinians may die from hunger and disease, yet the siege continues. Yeah, man. They already had issues getting clean water, and now it's even worse than that. Like, this is crazy. Like, they were already in a bad situation, and now it's getting worse. And not only is it, like, literally, like, a hellhole, the worst conditions imaginable on the planet, their spirits are still high. Like, you see some of these Palestinians, like, their spirits are still high. They're, staying together. They have very close, tight-knit family groups. The children are still somehow playful, keeping their spirits up. Again, like, the Palestinians are the bravest people right now on the planet. Like, it's really inspiring. Not to denigrate, their experiences or, to put it down. But, like, it is inspiring to see them banding together and, just showing the indomitable, like, human spirit, Yeah. So here, again, more points here. So the destruction of the healthcare system. The fourth genocidal action, Hassim said, is Israel's military assault on Gaza's healthcare system that renders life there unsustainable. Gaza's healthcare was already crippled by years of attacks by Israel, she said, and now it is simply unable to cope with the sheer number of injured people who need life-saving treatment. And the fifth point, so here, lastly, Hassim added, Israel is blocking life-saving treatment needed to deliver babies. This, she added, amounts to preventing births in Gaza and is an act of genocide. Hassim also cited Reem al-Salim, UN Special Rapporteur on violence against women and girls, who had earlier warned that the, quote, reproductive violence inflicted by Israel on Palestinian women, newborn babies, and infants and children could be qualified as acts of genocide. It's just crazy. There's like this unofficial report, so who knows whether or not this is true, but it most likely is, given the behavior of Israeli troops, that what Hamas has been doing is they put recordings of Palestinian children. They have playings of them, laughing or, just, children noises. Like, what the fuck? It's like, oh my God, it's just like, whenever you're hunting predators, say like coyotes or something, you put like a decoy that makes the sound of a baby animal, and then the coyote will come out like, huh? Like, it's the same thing. Like, they're hunting Israeli troops and they use the decoys of Palestinian children, which of course the Israeli troops are just going to go after because they're fucking murderers, and then they get attacked. This is just like, it's crazy to think about, man. It's a smart tactic from Hamas because they know how to draw out their enemy, but it just speaks to how depraved and just completely inhumane this barbarian military force that Israel is. Like, it's just because, of course, a child is defenseless. So, fuck it, just, kill this child because, if they actually have to go against Hamas, Hamas is smart. They're not going to just, like, pose themselves out in the open and get in a pitched battle. They're going to wait for the Israeli troops to come to them unsuspectingly and then strike. And again, as we've seen from all these, like, different Hamas videos, again, I don't want to speak too much about Hamas because, they are a terrorist group, but it's just like when you watch these videos, it's like, wow, like, this is how you fight. Like, it's just like, it's a masterpiece. Like I said, like, the October 7th attacks is going to be studied for decades as, like, one of the most remarkable guerrilla operations in history, and then also this invasion, because I mean this is like Stalingrad, like this is just like, you know, an urban hellhole, and because Israel has like bombed it and leveled it, it's to the advantage of the Hamas militants, because again they have their tunnel networks and they can just like pop out whenever. You know, they're literally like, again, they're literally running up to the tanks and just like, you know, planting the explosive and then running back into their holes. Like, they're not even using like serious suicide attacks. Like, they're just like, that's how, it's just remarkable. Again, this speaks to the strengths of guerrilla warfare and asymmetrical warfare, because when you have this large conventional force, you know, that has like tanks and such, you have to supply with fuel. When you have these soldiers who come from comfortable lives, you know, these first world imperialist nations, that they're not good. Like, eventually, there's going to get to a point where they're not going to want to be there, because like Gaza sucks. Okay, I mean, these are young guys that want to be out, hitting the club, getting laid. They don't want to be stuck here. So, you know, the morale situation is already bad enough. Like, and you know, the Hamas fighters who are fighting to defend their homes, like they're willing to stay however long it takes. They're willing to fight to the death. I mean, their situation was already bad. This is their home. They're going to fight to the end, to the last man. You know, so it's already like you're up against like it's the morale. It's, you know, they're defending. So already, like, being a defender is already like you have an advantage. Like, you know, you'll see some of the like, and again, this is like the way that they have to present the conflict. So you'll see a map of Gaza, and they'll try to like present it as like, look at the gains that Israel is making. But just because you see like the blue and the control of a region or an area in Gaza doesn't mean that it's entirely occupied or controlled. You know, again, man, like the deployment of troops in Gaza. Let me actually see again, because I don't know if they have the official numbers of the deployment of troops in Gaza. But let's see. So just reading from Wikipedia. So there's a deployment from Israeli forces of about 40,000. Okay, and it doesn't mean like 40,000 like ground troops, like, because a lot of it could be like support, you know, engineer corps and such. So yeah, so they're saying 40,000, around 40,000 troops deployed into Gaza. But the problem with that is, you know, and again, this is they only have, you know, the major operations are in the northern half of it, and they're starting to expand into the southern half. But like, in order to effectively control Gaza, you would need like probably like 200,000 troops just to like control the streets and control the areas. But that would require like a complete mobilization of Israel's like, you know, economy and like their war time measures, and like they're already having troubles like, you know, with domestic protests. Like, this war is unpopular. No matter what they try to, you know, say on like the Western outlets, this war is unpopular. Israelis want it done as soon as possible, but that's not going to happen. It's going to keep dragging on, and the more this drags on, the more friction it's going to cause, especially for their economy. And you know, the more troops that get not even killed, because again, you know, not as many troops have been killed, but plenty of them have been wounded and maimed. And the longer this drags on, like, this is just going to be a drain for the Israeli public, and more people are going to leave. And like this could be the beginning of the end. Like, I don't see it. Like, I don't know how long it would take, but like, Israel is not, I don't know, because I don't want to say like Israel's going to collapse like in our lifetime. It would be nice for that to happen, but this is sort of like the beginning of the end. If we're going to look back retrospectively, say like in 20 years or so, like, this is the beginning of the end. And this war, these continued hostilities, is all to protect Netanyahu. Again, this is, you know, I don't know when Israel is going to wake up to it, but they're going to be ground down for the political ambitions of this man who has no concern for their safety. Okay? Yeah, it's a mess. It's a mess what they're getting into. And, you know, the longer that this goes on, especially with the the ICJ proceedings. Whether or not they're going to continue with the trial, who knows? Because again, this is like the oral, opening statements that they're making, the arguments they're making. But yeah, we'll just have to see whether or not this actually goes to trial. So here, what's next? And they're talking about Israel's presentation. So Israel will present its oral arguments on Friday, which they've already done. And British lawyer Malcolm Shaw will lead his presentation. Legal experts say Tel Aviv is likely to argue that its actions are in self-defense following Hamas's October 7th attacks that killed, they keep lowering the numbers. So they killed 1,139 and saw more than 200 people taken hostage. According to Israeli authorities, Israeli officials have railed against the South African suit. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Thursday said South Africa presented hypocrisy and lies at the court. Quote, "We are fighting terrorists, we are fighting lies," Netanyahu said. Quote, "Today, we saw an upside-down world. Israel is accused of genocide while fighting against genocide," end quote. To drive its argument home, the South African team needs not only to prove that the indiscriminate mass killing it calls the genocides are indeed happening, but that there is an intent to commit these acts by Tel Aviv. Quote, "Genocides are never declared in advance," Hassim, the advocate, said in her presentation, adding that all the Israeli actions she detailed were proof of genocidal intent. Tambeka New-Kaid Toby, a second lawyer, cited Israeli official statements as further proof of intent. In particular, he recalled Netanyahu's comments on October 28th when the Prime Minister urged troops preparing to enter Gaza to, quote, "remember what Amalek has done to you, a biblical command from God to entirely destroy a group. Quote, the destruction of Palestinian life is articulated state policy," they added. Several countries and international organizations have rallied behind South Africa in the case. Malaysia, Bolivia, and Turkey are among them. Tel Aviv has the backing of the United States, its main weapons supplier and diplomatic patron. As the proceedings kicked off on Thursday, hundreds of pro-Palestinian demonstrators gathered in solidarity, and nearby pro-Israeli protesters marched too. So that is the court hearings that are being made, the opening arguments. So whether or not this continues to a trial, that's still up in the air. But it's history. This is history being made. It's just fascinating how they're trying to be like, oh well, we're innocent until proven guilty. But it's like, if we're going to trial at the genocide court, it's probably not a good look. It's just crazy, everything that's happening. And then of course you have to hear U.S. officials being like, there's no basis, no facts whatsoever. This is not real. Just it's just to see when you're on a team, right, and then you see that the U.S. and the U.K. and all these other Germany and other genocidal powers on your side, it's like, man, maybe we are the bad guys. It's just crazy, everything that's happening. I just, man, it's just so surreal. And again, it's just crazy because if this goes to trial, there's going to be a trial of a genocide that's happening in real time, and it's just new evidence is going to pop up every single day, and I'm guessing that these judges, who knows whether or not they're going to vote, because again, let's be real, much of international law is based was Western focused. It will just be interesting to see whether or not they actually follow through, and vote this as a genocide. And again, one legal argument that they're trying to make for Israel is saying that, technically Hamas is not a recognized state actor, so it can't be a genocide if it's against a non-state actor or something like that. It's just crazy to think about. Again, there's just no shame whatsoever, no shame, no self-reflection. And again, as I said, you can tell pretty much whether or not somebody is a good person on this matter alone. Okay, and this is not one of those situations where it's I don't know, it's too complicated, I don't want to read up on it. It's just you're being lazy, and honestly, that laziness just shows where your priorities are. That you want to take a moment to educate yourself on one of the most consequential like genocides of our time, like the human rights violations of our time. So I actually just checked my phone really quickly. Like I said, there's all kinds of escalations occurring. So they're reporting, this is actually escalating pretty quickly, damn. So what they're reporting is that the Iranian Republican Guard is making airstrike or missile strikes in Syria and Iraq. This is crazy to think about, actually. So they're saying in Erbil in northern Iraq. I'm trying to see further. Okay, yeah. I mean, this is what I mean. You just mind your business and then some random escalation occurs. So let's see what is being reported. So they're saying the U.S. consulate. I mean, there's been no casualties reported, but reports of the U.S. consulate and the international airport in Erbil, northern Iraq, getting struck with missiles. So yeah, this is escalating pretty quickly. Let's see here. So I'm reading from another. I mean, this is like mainly like open source intelligent posters on Twitter. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in Iran announced the targeting of spy headquarters for anti-Iranian terrorist groups in Erbil, northern Iraq, with ballistic missiles. So yeah, significant escalation here. Damn. Well, I'm going to have to keep an eye on this because who knows what happens at the end of this podcast. So yeah, that's at least, because I spoke at length about the Gaza conflict, the Israeli conflict, but now at least I want to talk about some other updates. I want to talk about Ukraine. I haven't talked about Ukraine for quite a while. There have been some major escalations occurring. So yeah, so that is something that I'll highlight further. So reading here from Al Jazeera, and just about the recent, I guess, escalations or updates in the conflict, because Ukraine is not in a good position. They're now starting, this is stalemate, but Ukraine now is starting to feel the pressure, so to speak. They're already having their own domestic turmoil and problems. Who knows, man? But yeah, they had the attempted counteroffensive in the summer, which has failed. And already, Russia is making advances. They're making advances across the whole line. Who knows how long the Ukrainian fronts can hold. But yeah, man, I could see it collapsing within a year. This is not good for them. So right here, from Al Jazeera, so Russia dismisses Davos' discussion on Ukrainian president's peace plan. It's kind of funny because Zelensky was saying for so long, there's no negotiations, we'll make no peace. But now, I guess they want to have peace talks or so, but even then, these peace talks that they're trying to make, it's still from a position of like, oh, we're not going to surrender. And yeah, so it's just kind of crazy to think about. So here, from Al Jazeera, so Russia has dismissed discussions on a peace plan proposed by Ukraine at the World Economic Forum in Davos in Switzerland as pointless. The talks in the Swiss mountain resort will achieve nothing without Moscow's participation, the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov insisted on Monday. Organizers said 83 delegations had been present at the meeting to discuss the plan the previous day. Put forward by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, the 10-point peace plan designed to end the war sparked by Russia's invasion of its neighbor in February 2022 calls for the withdrawal of Russian troops, restoration of Ukraine's state borders, and Russian accountability for war crimes. So it's not even like a sensible peace plan, because whenever you're making a peace plan, especially with such demands, as oh, you have to pull out and you also have to face war crimes, it's like you are not in a position to make such demands. Okay, Ukraine is on the back foot, so it's like we're ready for peace, but you have to pull out and you have to withdraw. It's just it's completely unserious, man. I don't even know what Zelensky's doing. This guy is not gonna make it. He's gonna get couped or assassinated soon enough. Yeah. But again, it's just it's totally unserious. They're losing. Ukraine is losing, and then you're gonna still make demands that no, you have to pull out. It's just crazy. I don't even know what they're thinking. So here, the proposal was discussed at a summit of national security advisors at the annual WEF meeting on Sunday. Zelensky's plan had previously been discussed at 3 such gatherings. Andriy Yermak, the Ukrainian president's chief of staff, called it a good sign that the number of participants in the string of conferences is expanding. While nearly half the delegation present on Sunday were from Europe, there were 18 from Asia and 12 from Africa. Quote, countries from the global south are increasingly getting involved in our work. It shows understanding that this European conflict is in fact a challenge for all humanity, he wrote. However, Ukraine insists it will not discuss the plan with Russia. Zelensky has decreed that any talks with Russia are illegal. So you want to have a peace talk, but don't want to invite or even like sort of negotiate with Russia. And again, like look at the demands are like pull out and restore the state borders, but it's like, how are you going to enforce that? You're not in a position of strength. Like you can't enforce it. And what are you going to do? You're going to sanction me? Like it's just like what's the plan? Like okay, that has motivated Russia, which controls a little less than a fifth of Ukrainian territory, to dismiss the idea as absurd. Quote, this is simply talking for the sake of talking, Peskov said. Quote, this process cannot be aimed at achieving any specific results for the obvious reason. We are not participating. Without our participation, any discussions are devoid of any prospect of any result. It's like, yeah, like, it's like, what the hell? Like, they were going to make a peace plan, but not involve, like, the major combatant power. Ignacio Cassis, the Swiss foreign minister who co-hosted the peace plan discussion in Davos, said the meeting was part of a process aimed eventually at securing Russian participation, although he admitted that Moscow is far from ready to cooperate. Here's the arms race, at least they're saying. So Zelensky also praised the discussion for including representatives from Latin America, Africa, and Asia. He arrived in Davos on Monday afternoon on a trip during which he will bid to rally support for Ukraine amid signs of fatigue in the United States and the European Union. He claimed that work on security guarantees and new support packages is progressing. Quote, there are much needed agreements on the joint production of weapons and shells. A particular sensitive issue is drones. There will be more drones. We are preparing more good news on air defense. We keep in mind both missiles and electronic warfare. There will be more of them, he said. With the war bogged down in trenches across the front lines in eastern Ukraine, air attacks featuring planes, missiles, and drones have intensified. Russian air defense systems destroyed 3 missile launches by Ukraine over the southwest Kursk region early on Monday, the Russian Ministry of Defense said on its channel on Telegram messaging app. Ukraine, meanwhile, reported it has downed 2 military command aircraft over the Sea of Azov. The intensified air war has prompted Ukraine to press harder on Western allies for donations of missiles and air defense equipment. Meanwhile, Russia has been criticized for breaking international sanctions as it sources weapons from North Korea. Moscow and Pyongyang have denied arms deals but have declared deepening cooperation across the board. On Monday, Russia Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov welcomed his North Korean counterpart, Cho Son-hui, as she arrived in Moscow on an official visit. So that is at least an update there. Proposed peace talks that don't include Russia. Just completely unreasonable demands. You have to pull out, but it's like you're not in a position of strength to enforce that. And then also, just escalating, as they said, escalating air war, right? Yeah, just recently, actually, there was artillery strikes that Ukraine made against Belgorod, primarily the civilian center there. And then in return, Russia has been launching their ballistic missiles. So it's a back and forth. I mean, this is an interesting stage of warfare where we have like these missiles and drones, and we're just like launching attacks, air attacks, and as they also pointed out, the ground war. I'm sorry if you hear some buzzing. I don't know what my neighbors are doing. So there's an increasing, the ground operations. There's a stalemate, as they said. There's trenches. It's like very much like World War One. Like there's trenches, horrible conditions. They were seeing videos of like the rat problems that they've been dealing with. Like it's just like World War One. It's crazy. But it's getting, they're getting bogged down, and this is like the war of attrition that everybody wanted to avoid, but like we're already in it. And like there was a report that was showing that much of the NATO equipment that has been sent over isn't really built for those sort of conditions and for like that sort of deployment. Yeah, I mean, even like some of like the self-propelled artilleries, like they're not built for the sort of like constant like firing that is required in this sort of conditions. I mean, that's the thing about like NATO equipment, because everybody wants to, a lot of these like NATO, chauvinists, like they're just like, oh, like NATO is the best, NATO this, NATO that. Not that NATO isn't effective, but the equipment is expensive. So, when something is expensive, it's very delicate, and it's not really built for like that sort of like rugged, attrition that is needed in this sort of warfare. They try to be all surgical and precise and super advanced, but it's like when something is expensive, it is very delicate compared to Russian equipment. Not that it's great, it's certainly rudimentary, but it is designed to endure those conditions, and it's cheap, and of course they're getting sourced from North Korea as well. And actually, there's something I should talk about, because North Korea now has escalations with South Korea, and there was like some, they're basically like dueling artillery right now, but they're like North Korea is firing into the ocean, so like right off the coast of these islands, and South Korea in return is doing their own live fire drills. So it's sort of like it's sort of funny to think about. Imagine if like two people were like, they're shooting at each other, like they're standing right in front of each other, but they're not hitting you. They're just like they're shooting at your feet, but not actually hitting you. And it's just like that's basically what's happening. Yeah, it's just kind of crazy to think about. But yeah, we're already sort of seeing the different like coalitions that are forming, where you have Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, sort of cooperating and forming their own pact. And then, of course, the Western powers, the allies, you could call it, NATO. So yeah, there's already increased cooperation happening. But yeah, so here at least, talking about, that peace plan, which of course isn't going to go anywhere because they're not involving Russia. There's other aspects to highlight. So you can talk about just the overall counteroffensive that occurred and why that isn't exactly happening, and what the ground conditions are in Ukraine, because it's not good. The situation for Ukraine is not good, and I don't know. I mean, like things could truly escalate within the year or deteriorate, because there's already talks. Like there was a proposed plan in Ukraine to mobilize like 400,000 like troops to like recruit and mobilize, or I should say draft, conscript 400,000 troops. And I'm like, do they even have that available? And I mean like young fighting men, like that is, the situation that's occurring, yeah, I mean, they're just going to get ground down. And they're just like, I mean, it's a country of 40 million people, and they're going to mobilize like 10% of the population just like that. And it's just like, and again, no sense of like, again, like if they had just like let Crimea and Donbass go, then this wouldn't have escalated. But now they're poised to lose more territory, because Russia can continue for I mean, they can keep going. I mean, of course, they want this to end as soon as possible, but like they can just sit around. They can just occupy the territory and wait, and Ukraine's situation is going to get worse and worse, and Russia's going to just take inch by inch by inch by inch. Ukraine hasn't made a single advance. In fact, the territory that the small bit of territory that they did gain in the counteroffensive has already been lost. So like, what are they going to do now? It's just like they're like, I don't know. And again, I'm not saying that it's good that Ukraine got invaded, but like you have to come to reality that like they're not going to win it back, and you can't just like wage a war forever. It's just like, it's crazy. So yeah, from the Business Insider here, I'm just reading their analysis, at least from a memoir, about the ambitions that they have for the counteroffensive, and sort of like the divisions between Kiev and Washington about the strategy that they should continue with. So here, from Business Insider, So Ukraine's forces slammed against stiff Russian defenses in southern Ukraine this summer, and ultimately the counteroffensive failed. Unable to get the U.S. on board earlier, the move in a critical sector of southern Ukraine came a year later when the country's top general first wanted to make it. A new book reports. Had it come when he wanted, it might have reshaped the war, for better or worse. Commander-in-Chief of Armed Forces of Ukraine General Valery Zaluzhny pushed for a bold and, by some observations, risky counteroffensive in 2022 that never came to be, according to a new book, Our Enemy Will Vanish, by Yaroslav Trofimov, the Wall Street Journal's chief foreign affairs correspondent. It was a plan to punch through parts of Zaporizhzhia and sever the so-called land bridge to isolate Russian forces in Crimea. During discussions with Western powers of plans for a 2022 counteroffensive, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Zaluzhny, his top general, both advocated for a push down to the Sea of Azov through the Zaporizhzhia region. At that point, Russia had not constructed the extensive minefields and fortifications that would hinder the 2023 counteroffensive there, lightening the breaching demands. Such an approach would still be a daunting challenge and a gamble. The penetration would need to not only be deep, but also sufficiently wide to prevent Russians from counterattacking and threatening the flanks of the advancing forces. But if the Ukrainian move worked, it might have allowed the Ukrainians to capitalize on their momentum after the Battle of Kiev and Russian losses elsewhere, as Trofimov writes, deprive Moscow of its biggest prize in the war. So that's at least their plan. And again, this article, I think, is trying to present it as it's a missed opportunity, which I don't even think even in that early stage, even with the embarrassing outcome of the initial invasion, I don't even think then it would work. Okay, especially now since we've given so much equipment and ammunition, it's we've doubled, we've increased so much support and aid to Ukraine, and even then they still couldn't get through. So I don't even think it would have mattered back then either, but who knows. So not asking for much, Ukraine didn't come to the US with a major ask. Zaluzhny estimated Ukraine only needed an additional 90 howitzer and a sufficient amount of artillery ammunition to pull it off. They're saying this is not a major ask. We only need 90 guns of howitzers and how many thousands of ammunition, shells of ammunition, and even then that probably wouldn't have been enough. Yeah, whether that would have been enough, or if Ukraine would have also needed weapons like armored personnel carriers and fighting vehicles or even tanks, is difficult to assess. But the possibility exists that with a large enough fighting force, Ukraine could have achieved something similar to what it did in Kharkiv in September 2022, when Russian lines collapsed and Ukrainian forces recaptured thousands of square kilometers of territory in its northeast. The Zaporizhzhia area seemed ripe for a major attack, unlike the Kherson region, another option further west that was divided by Ukraine's longest river. A successful assault in this area had the potential to allow the Ukrainians to drive further. But when the planning was happening, Ukraine hadn't yet demonstrated any offensive prowess, and U.S. officials were wary. There were concerns a push from Berdyansk to Melitopol and down to the Azov Sea might create vulnerabilities in the line, especially given uncertainty about whether or not Ukraine could coordinate brigades for an effective offensive. From the U.S. perspective, Trofimov writes, quote, failure was likely and its consequences potentially catastrophic. End quote. Such a risky move could result in a strategic loss that could see Russia take the remainder of the Zaporizhzhia and later Dnipro. Rather than support the objectives Ukraine wanted, the U.S. pushed Ukraine to focus on different targets for its southern counteroffensive, Kherson. It was a safer option, and the stakes were lower. The city was an important early Russian war when and one Ukraine would decide to pursue instead of Zaporizhzhia. In that offensive, Ukraine's attacks on bridges shattered the resupply routes Russia needed for its occupiers in Kherson, forcing the Russians to retreat across the Dnieper River. Quote, the reason we recommended that they do Kherson was that they didn't have trained personnel and the kit to go south. A senior Pentagon official involved in these discussions told Trofimov, adding that, quote, we thought that if they bit off more than they can chew in the south, they would get routed. And most likely would have happened. Because again, it's one thing to break through, but it's another thing to hold it. And like they said, like, you actually have to like control. I mean, there's the spearhead into it, but then you actually have to control the flanks, and that's I mean, even that early stage, like, that is very unlikely. Yeah, so Zaluzhny disagreed, his aide said, telling Trofimov that the general argued Ukraine, quote, must attack where we should, not where we can. But as the U.S. controlled the majority of military aid to Ukraine, there was little arguing. Kherson it was. In November 2022, the Pentagon called Ukraine's liberation of Kherson, which followed a surprise sweeping northeastern offensive in the Kharkiv region, a, quote, a significant accomplishment and a testament to the grit and determination and tenacity of Ukraine. It was at that time an impressive move and an indication that Ukraine's rebuff of Russian forces thus far in the war weren't a fluke. But as Trofimov writes, Zaluzhny had wanted a high-risk, high-reward offensive in 2022 that never materialized, though, and it is impossible to know for sure how that might have played out. Ukraine ultimately did launch a counteroffensive in Zaporizhzhia, hoping to cut down to the Sea of Azov, but that came a year later than Zaluzhny had planned in fall 2023, months after the second Ukrainian offensive had begun, and this time Russia was more prepared. So they're just continuing on about this offensive. Yeah, so they wanted to attack earlier, which most likely would have failed, to be quite honest. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know how to even characterize this like a military establishment for Ukraine. Again, they're very much just driven by like honor and glory in the battlefield. They wanted to just like go in and attack. And I want to see something, because they talk about this guy, and I think I saw on another like image, this Zaluzhny general, that he had like a black sun sort of insignia. Like, let's see here, because again, so many different like soldiers and officials in the Ukrainian military, they always like have some sort of like a Nazi patch or something like that. Let's see here if I can find a picture of it. Probably not, but then again, this is Ukraine we're talking about, so maybe it was some other general. But yeah, it's just not a good look. And again, back then, before they had like this whole surplus of military equipment, they couldn't have done it, and even now they can't do it. And of course, I'm guessing this article is trying to portray like the U.S. establishment as like, oh, they failed to take advantage of this offensive. But yeah, it's I mean, Ukraine is just, the longer this war drags on, the more their conditions are going to deteriorate. And like I said, I mean, they could collapse within the year. I mean, who knows? Who knows how long they can continue like this? I mean, they even said, like Zelensky said, we cannot have elections, or something like that. So like they're going to start experiencing like internal turmoil. Yeah. So let's see here. So I'm just reading a little further. Again, you have to take everything with a grain of salt. But I just read another post. I'm trying to see where they're even sourcing this. But they're saying that there's already a border clash happening between Israel and Egypt. I don't know. I don't want to believe that just yet. So, can't really clarify anything. Yeah, I don't want to say anything without certainty, because it could very well not even be like the Egyptian army, but just like gunmen. But yeah, man, it's just like one thing after the other is escalating. Okay. I don't get too distracted on my phone, but like I said, there was, just recent airstrikes in Iraq from the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. So yeah, one thing after the other is going to escalate. So anyway, so that's at least, just my commentary on, different military actions that are occurring. There's, of course, the Israel, Gaza, war, genocide that's unfolding. than the larger, criminal, the genocide, ICJ trial. That's soon enough will be announced. Possibly within the next couple of weeks, announce if it's going to go to trial, and then also just highlighting some details about the Ukraine war, propositions for peace talks, but not really serious to begin with because they don't include Russia. Unserious demands, and also just like divisions that are occurring with the U.S. establishment, military establishment, differences in strategy. So pretty heavily, military focused. This isn't exactly, exclusively a military analysis program, but that is an area that, I'm interested in and that I can comment on. But yeah, at least now I want to highlight some other details, more so on like natural disasters, sort of commentary. But yeah, right now, at least, just speaking on like natural phenomenon that's occurring, because I live in Texas, and right now actually in Texas, or just throughout most of the U.S., we're experiencing sort of an Arctic blast, hard freeze that's occurring. And yeah, it's sort of interesting to see this unfold. Being somebody who has lived through past blizzards, it's kind of funny. We're almost like 3 years to the date of the past blizzard that occurred, where like we lost power, and it was pretty much like almost an apocalypse. And I was lucky. To have some supplies ready. I had like a water filter, so I was able to melt down snow and clean it to get some clean water. And I was able to I had an axe to chop up some firewood, and I had I had all these supplies ready in case of a grit down situation, and I was good to go, and I was able to stay warm. I had like some like flint and some like fire starting equipment. Yeah, man. So very lucky during that blizzard that we had. Of course, this isn't as bad. It's mainly, there is ice. Like, it's frozen out there. There's ice on the road, so I'm not driving anywhere. I have my supplies ready. The water and the power seems to be working fine, so hopefully we'll be okay. Although, like, this morning there was like a conservation warning. So, yeah, it's already a bit of a strain. Actually, let me look at the power outage map to see if there's any updates. Because when I woke up this morning, it was already like 31,000 customers. Let me see. Okay. So yeah, not the worst experience happening. Yeah, so let's see here. So Texas on January 15th, around 4:17 p.m. on the power outage map, there's about 16,000 customers experiencing power outage. So of course, it sucks for those customers not having power. But yeah, it's not like a complete just collapse that happened in 2021. And mainly it was because there was like much heavier like snow and ice that was there. It's funny though, because I know for a fact people aren't driving out now. Let me see. Because like people are ordering DoorDash pretty heavily, but like I am not getting out there. Nope. Yeah. No, sir. And the people still won't tip. Like, that's just the way things is. But yeah. I got my food. I got water. So, we should be fine. But yeah, I'm not driving out in this. And it's crazy, too. I actually just, like, had to change my tire. Because yesterday I drove over a nail. And it was already pretty cold then. Like, I had to change out my tire in, like, 30-degree weather. And, I did it. I changed my tire. It's pretty manly man stuff, I felt pretty proud because I did it quickly. I did it like probably less than 30 minutes, honestly. Like, I did it quickly. And it was cold and windy. But yeah, it's just crazy. The conditions there are. But honestly, like, I prefer this, like cold and ice. I prefer this to the summer because fucking sucks when it's hot. So I'm gonna savor this cold as much as I can. But yeah, because like I don't want to have to deal with the heat in the summer. It's so hot. and it's going to get worse. And it's so interesting too, because like we're experiencing this, cold blast, Arctic blast, and then like you hear like these climate deniers being like, "Oh, it's the HARP or whatever." It's like the conspiracy theory of like weaponized weather. Like it's the HARP device that has been activated. That's why it's snowing so heavily. It's just like, God, people are so stupid, man. It's like they'll literally believe like the dumbest conspiracy theories instead of just like basic climate science. Like I can't stand it. But yeah, at least just talking really quickly, at least in Houston, the effects that are occurring, because again, we live in Texas and we're not really used to this sort of weather. We're starting to adapt to it better. But yeah, it's sort of interesting to live through this. Like right now it's actually 25 degrees. Like it has been below freezing the whole day, and it's going to get even colder tomorrow. So it's basically just like 2 full days of like freezing temperatures. So I'm actually like I took a little walk, and it's pretty cold out, but I want to see actually like the pool, whether or not there's ice in the pool. So I'll check that out later. But yeah, let's just at least read from the Houston Chronicle. Just some quick, points about this weather. So here, winter weather in Houston led to event cancellations and dangerous conditions throughout the region Monday. A cold air mass pushed into the Houston area with freezing rain, prompting winter weather advisories for much of southeast Texas, along and north of I-10. Here is the latest in winter weather advisories. Updates on road conditions and school closures. So just pretty quick road conditions here. So although the National Weather Service winter weather advisory for southeast Texas will expire at 6 p.m., signaling the end of precipitation, forecasters warn that with temperatures staying below freezing into Tuesday, the current hazardous roadway conditions could still be a challenge for morning commuters. So Monday's wintry mixture of freezing rain and light sleet will end by early evening, forecasters said, adding that we won't see any more precipitation after that, but with daytime temperatures across southeast Texas likely stuck at sub-freezing levels, likely until at least Wednesday afternoon. Houston area roads already slick with ice could stay that way well after precipitation ends. It's possible that with clear skies and bright sunshine expected Tuesday afternoon, that conditions might help push temperatures slightly above freezing, albeit to only near 35 degrees. That's still almost 35 degrees colder than normal for this time of year, and would break the daily record for coldest high temperatures on January 6th, which is 37 degrees set in 2007. And then here, they're talking about ERCOT, because of course everybody paying attention to ERCOT. So ERCOT, and this is the sort of like the Texas energy regulations. So ERCOT, conserve energy Tuesday morning. So ERCOT is asking Texans to conserve electricity, if safe, from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Tuesday because winter storms and cold temperatures. ERCOT's original appeal asked that Texans conserve energy for several hours Monday morning. Officials said the conservation appeal is not an indication of grid emergency, but a standard ask for peak demand times, which typically happen in the morning hours during winter weather. If anyone suffers an outage, it is likely local, and residents should contact local electric providers. The organization said it avoided emergency operations, quote, due to the conservation efforts by Texas residents and businesses, combined with grid reliability tools. ERCOT set a new January peak demand of nearly 71,000 megawatts from 8 to 9 p.m. Sunday, surpassing the previous record of nearly 66,000 in January 2018. The peak demand grew again on Monday to more than 75,000. So, yes, demand for energy. The organization expects peak demand to happen at 8 a.m. Tuesday with more than 81,000 megawatts as freezing temperatures continue. So, this is going to be interesting, to say the least. Well, let's see here. So, it's so funny that they're, talking about like the road conditions and such. But yeah, school is still open. So here, Houston ISD is planning to hold classes Tuesday, despite the possibility of a hard freeze settling over the area Tuesday morning. The district is taking a number of precautions to ensure that school will be ready to receive the more than 180,000 students enrolled in HISD. Others, including Fort Bend ISD, Pearland ISD, and Aldine ISD, said that they are closely monitoring weather conditions, encourage their communities to monitor district websites and social media feeds for updates. So they're still continuing with classes, even with like the ice and sub-freezing temperatures, and I don't know. I mean, like I'm just freshly graduated, so I'm sort of just like, man, like I'm still in like a school sort of mindset. Like I keep thinking that like, oh, I gotta get ready for next semester, but I'm like, no, I'm graduated. I'm not gonna think about this anymore. But yeah, it would suck to be a student and still have to go to class with these conditions. Yeah, I mean, and tomorrow's gonna be the coldest, so it's just like all the. I mean, I don't know. I don't even think Houston has like the salt to really like keep most of the roadways clear. But who knows? I don't know. I don't even know if they have salt here. Like when the blizzard hit last time, like I didn't even see a single snowplow. Like we just had to wait for the snow to melt. So, yeah. That's at least Houston. Let me see at least. Damn. Okay, so they just read, because this is what happens sometimes. Because people try to stay warm, and then they use like unconventional means. So here they talk about a fire caused by heating lamps. So heating lamps intended to keep several dogs warm as Houston area temperatures veered towards freezing caused a fatal fire Monday at a North Harris County's family home. According to fire marshal officials, firefighters with Aldine Fire Department were called out 1 a.m. First responders arrived within minutes and found a man who died trying to escape the blaze. Brandy Dumas, a spokesperson for the Harris County Fire Marshal's office, he has not been identified. A woman and 2 children got out of the home and were taken to a hospital as precautions for smoke inhalation, and several dogs were killed in the fire. So, very sad. But yeah, that's what happens, People try to stay warm and then they cause a fire, or, what happened? Dude, like, this is crazy to think about what people had to do in 2021. Like, people were, like, burning coals inside because they had no other means to stay warm, and then they obviously choked on the fumes, or they would try to turn on their cars, but they wouldn't open their garage, and that carbon monoxide suffocated them. So it's just like, it's crazy to think about in Texas what people have to do to stay warm in the winter, and then they die inadvertently. It's like it's like a medieval like winter. It's just like crazy to think about like what people have to do. Crazy. And again, like, it's cold, but the real test is going to be when the snow hits. And there was a bit of a forecast for some snow, at least in my area. But like, the real test of the grid system is the ice and the snow. And we're going to have another blizzard eventually. And I don't know what's going to happen at that point. So yeah. So I want to read at least, because that's at least, sort of like a winter, sort of Texas conditions. I mean, honestly, like, I kind of still have, I wouldn't say PTSD, but some trauma from it, even though it was sort of like a pretty chill experience. But it was like an actual, like, survival situation. And because at that point, everybody thought I was crazy because I was doing, buying all this equipment and supplies because I thought that there was going to be an emergency crisis situation. I mean, like, me buying supplies like that caused like a rift with certain family members because they thought I was a terrorist or something, and I was just buying like basic camping equipment. And then of course a blizzard hits where I was totally vindicated, and they don't even think about that anymore. Like, this is why like I have such a disconnect with certain like relations, because there's just no awareness, no reflection. And of course, nobody listens to anything I say. So it's just like, at a certain point, it's like, okay, well, I got to look out for myself because nobody takes my word seriously. Nobody, I mean, again, I literally just graduated with a degree in history, and still, like, any comments I make are going to be disregarded. So it's just like, after a certain point, I got to live on my own and take care of myself. again, that's why I don't really want to move back, because it's just like, well, nobody's going to listen to me. I don't know, man. I mean, I love my family, but it's like when I think about, a crisis collapse situation, it's like I don't even know how I would even survive with them if I could even tolerate it. It's just like there's no sense of urgency, you know. Anyway, I don't want to get too hung up on that, but it's just like, I reflect on these experiences, and for me it makes sense, and for me it's vindicating, but for others who don't have this awareness, it's just like, it's like talking to a child. It's like, that there's no adaptation, there's no sense of, there's no survival instincts. It's just, yeah. Anyway, so that's at least the winter weather effects that are occurring, and of course, still trying to monitor that situation. But here, at least, I wanted to talk about some other different events that occurred, and more specifically, with earthquakes and volcanoes. So very recently in Japan, on New Year's Day, there was a pretty significant earthquake that occurred, 7.6 magnitude earthquake that has caused some significant damage and casualties. So yeah, it's just, something to follow. Again, living in Japan, it's just crazy to think about all the different natural disasters that occur there. These earthquakes and such, they're catastrophic, and tsunamis as well. It's just kind of crazy to think about. So here, reading from the Associated Press, at least some air reporting here. So the 7.6 magnitude earthquake that hit the western coastline of Japan on New Year's has killed 213 people as of Thursday. 8 of the deaths were at evacuation centers where rescued people died from injuries and sickness. Such deaths were directly caused by quakes, fires, and mudslides. They happened in alleged safety. Quote, "The pressures and stresses of living in a place where you aren't used to leads to such death," says Shigeru Nishimori, a disaster official in Ishikawa Prefecture, the hardest hit region. Some 26,000 people whose homes were destroyed or deemed unsafe are staying at schools and other makeshift facilities. Even minor rain and snow can set off landslides where the ground is loose from the more than 1,000 aftershocks that rattled the region for more than a week. Half collapsed homes might flatten. Shinichi Koriyama, director at the International Research Institute of Disaster Science, who has studied the earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear disaster that hit northeastern Japan in 2011, warned that the chances of death double among populations undergoing a disaster. He said the number of deaths in Ishikawa evacuation centers surprised him. Quote, "I'm really shocked," he said. Communication is key, and it appears to be sorely lacking. Kuriyama said the most vulnerable can be overlooked, missing food that's being distributed, for instance, because they are unaware or can't reach it. He added that Japanese tend to suffer in silence, which can make things worse. Deaths from the New Year's temblor centered on Noto Peninsula and Ishikawa have climbed daily as research teams pull more bodies from the rubble. Of the deaths, 98 were in Suzu City, 83 in Wajima, and 20 in Anamizu, with the rest in smaller numbers among 4 other towns. The number of missing people declined in recent days and now stands at 52. So those injured totaled 567, and 1,830 homes were destroyed or seriously damaged. According to Ishikawa officials, more than 14,000 homes were without electricity, and nearly 59,000 homes had no running water. A tsunami reaching as high as about 3 meters spewed into coastal homes after last week's biggest quake. A fire destroyed part of Wajima City. A search began Tuesday into the remains of the fires for bodies. Authorities warned about the raised risk of infectious diseases breaking out among people crammed into shelters. Food and drinking water supplies were short, especially initially. People slept on cold floors, some without blankets, amid dropping temperatures and harsh winds. Sheets were hung for partitions to provide privacy in an effort to curtail the spread of disease. So yeah, it's a pretty dire situation. So it's unfortunate. But yeah, it's interesting to read about seismic activity and earthquakes and volcanoes and tsunamis. And it's interesting because I have read some theories about seismic activity and how climate change has influenced that. So who knows? Because there has been some recent seismic activities, especially like volcanoes, eruptions occurring in the last year or so. So yeah, man, it's just like it's fascinating to read about this, and it's almost like the earth itself is just like shaking and waking up. Humanity is like the earth is sending a signal, right? Like if there's like all these like weather events occurring, and then now all these like eruptions and earthquakes happening, like earth is just like knocking humanity down a peg, so yeah, so that's at least in Japan, in that earthquake there. And then in Iceland there have also been increased volcanic activity, and it's been pretty fascinating because some of these images are pretty hardcore, if I'm being honest with you. Like, it's just seeing like a volcanic fissure and then like just like fountains of lava just like spewing out, and then it's just crazy to think about. And then when you see stuff like this, and then you think about like the first like Nordic settlements that were made in Iceland, like these were they believed in like Odin, right, and Thor and like all these things, and you're on an island that is basically like alive with like all these earthquakes and volcanoes. Like how did people back then even manage that, And then they endured that, and they continue today. Iceland, I would imagine, has like all kinds of like sensors and such. So that's how they were able to detect, because of course there was before these sort of explosions, there's always like mini earthquakes that are detected, so they could see that, okay, there's gonna be an eruption here, and they had to evacuate this town. And now of course the eruption is occurring, and now the town itself is starting to like burn from the lava. So yeah, so it's interesting to follow. But yeah, so here reading from NPR. So lava from a volcanic eruption in southwestern Iceland has streamed into a nearby town, engulfing homes and forcing the evacuation of local residents. The Icelandic Meteorological Office said the eruption began just before 8 a.m. local time Sunday, about half a mile from the town of Grindavik, after a series of intense earthquakes. A second fissure opened after noon Sunday and sent lava flows into the town, officials said. Iceland's President Gudni Johannesson, I hope I said that right, said in an address to the nation on Sunday that a, quote, daunting period of upheaval had begun for those in the Reykjanes Peninsula. Quote, we continue to hope for as good an outcome as possible in the face of these tremendous forces of nature, he said. This is the second time in a month that a volcano has erupted outside of Grindavik, a coastal town just about 25 miles from the Icelandic capital of Reykjavik. That's funny. Like, imagine if this was in Reykjavik, like the capital itself is just going to get like consumed in lava. Like, that's just crazy. Like, the way they're talking about it is like they're under invasion, but it's the earth itself. Like, how do you fight that? Right, here, right, an eruption on December 18th said lava spewing into the air, but residents had already been told to leave due to heightened seismic activity. Iceland's government said Sunday that Grindavik had been evacuated early that morning, and that the eruption isn't expected to reach other populated areas. So far, no flights have been disrupted, and officials are monitoring threats to infrastructure. At least 3 homes have either burned or been overtaken by lava, according to the Icelandic broadcaster RUV. The government also said the eruption doesn't present threat to life. So, yeah, it's a pretty interesting eruption that has occurred. At least, because it's not a serious, people's homes are going to get burned, so that's not good, but there's no serious threat to life. But yeah, it's just, volcanic eruptions always fascinating to me, because it's just like an actual, like, it's like a giant, waking up and like just like clawing itself out of the earth. It's just like it's so alive. Like you're seeing the actual planet itself just like come to life, And then of course, this changes the geography and the topography and, mountains will be made out of this, or who knows, or say like in the Pacific, right? Like entire islands are created from volcanoes. So yeah, it's interesting. It's fascinating to follow. Iceland is like one of those countries that I would very much love to visit. It's it's on my list there. So it's interesting to follow this. Of course, though, because this is mainly like a lava, like sort of eruption. Because like there's other volcanic eruptions that have occurred where there's like so much ash in the air that it like changes like the global temperatures, or like causes disruption in flights and such. So who knows if something else erupts later on. But yeah, this is at least just a little tidbit on the Icelandic eruptions. So yeah, so continuing at least, and this will be the last article that I'll read because it's mainly focused on like COVID. Of course, as it's been the holiday season, or at least we're getting past the holiday season, there has been a heavy surge in COVID. Yeah, so who knows what happened, or again, people are going to get sick, and of course Americans don't like masking up. They just don't want to mask up, and of course it's going to increase the spread. Like COVID is like the third leading cause of death, and like Americans just have no like self-reflection as to like why that's the case, and what sort of health measures you have to take. And I'll admit, actually, I don't know if it was COVID. I'm pretty healthy, because I think if it was COVID, like there would have been far greater effects on my body. But like I'll admit, like after I came back from the holidays, I did develop some like sinus like issues, runny nose and mucus. But I didn't have a fever or anything, so it wasn't like anything serious. I didn't get tested for COVID. I should have, but like I don't even know where to get a test, and like I don't want to have to pay like a whole bunch of money for it. And at least I did mask up. So I did put on my mask, and I had to keep working. That's the thing too. It's just like there's no measures to help you if you did get sick, and like you were just like you can't do anything. You're just bedridden. Like there's no measures for you. All those stimulus checks just done. So now if you're sick with COVID, you still gotta work. That's why it keeps spreading, because working people, which is recent casualty figures being released show that the main casualties and deaths that are occurring are among like poor working class people, retail workers, or like especially in the food service industry. So it's like you got to still work, So I still had to continue with DoorDash. At least I was wearing my mask. But yeah, man, I'm probably just gonna keep my mask on now, which sucks because I was starting to take my mask off and starting to like socialize again. Because I like smiling at people. So that's the thing with wearing a mask. I don't like wearing a mask. Nobody likes wearing a mask, but it's just like I'm not gonna take my chances. And I already got sick. I don't even know if it was COVID. Probably was, maybe, but like I didn't, like I said, didn't have any serious symptoms. But now I'm wearing my mask, and I'm probably not going to take it off anytime soon, or probably just never. I'll probably just keep my mask on. I wore a mask on my graduation, even though my parents were complaining. I was just like, I'm wearing a mask, so I should continue with that. I always should have continued with that. We should all continue wearing masks, but it's just kind of crazy how like how unserious Americans are about public health, because it's all about me, right? Like I wear a mask for others, because my whole thing was like, even maybe I am sick with COVID, well, I'm gonna wear a mask so that way at the very least I'm not spreading it. But it's just like, yeah. But then you see the looks that you get. Again, like I live in a small Texas town. There's a college, so of course there are more liberal, progressive people here, but a lot of them are pretty country white folks, and just the look that they give you is just like, oh, why are you wearing a mask? It's just stupid, so stupid. But then it's like we're dealing with COVID now, but there's gonna be continued mutations, especially with these new strains. So it's just crazy. And again, as I'm reading here from NBC News, there is a new strain, a variant, and that could be contributing to this strain, or to this surge. Honestly, it's the um, like the largest surge in a while now, and it's going to continue. I don't know, man. Like, it just makes me disturbed, even though like we're still pretty much in a pandemic. But it's just so disturbing to me how, like, I don't know, Americans, like, they just don't want to deal with like again, there's like so much talk about like we gotta buckle down and we gotta work together and be Americans. But it's like we just had a pandemic, a serious pandemic, where you had that opportunity to, do the right thing and, like, buckle down, and y'all didn't want to do it because your Applebee's and your nightclubs were more important. And then now look what's happening, and it's going to keep getting worse. I mean, this pandemic truly has broken my trust in the American public, because, like, we're so selfish, and I'm not even without guilt, but it's just like it doesn't give me much hope whenever there'll be a new pandemic, which is definitely going to happen. There's going to be a new pandemic, and there's going to be far worse, probably even more resistant to vaccines and such, and that's just going to be like, that's going to be done. Like, I don't know, man. Like, we're like, I mean, the COVID pandemic was pretty much an apocalypse, and we're living in the post-COVID world, even though it's still endemic. So it's like a post-COVID world, but it's still happening. But we all just want to pretend that it's over, even though it's still very much real. I don't know, man. Like I said, just no trust in the American public and our establishment. It's disappointing, because especially now when I see other people, other friends and family who like kind of like don't want to think about this, but like this is inescapable. But of course, if I bring it up, oh no, I'm being negative and pessimistic, even though it's like this is serious. I don't know. Anyway, so just continuing, NBC about this new surge, the JN1 variant, and this new wave of hospitalizations and deaths that are going to break out from this. So just reading their report here. So the U.S. is currently in the midst of a COVID wave fueled by the JN1 variant that's driving up hospitalizations and deaths across the country. For most people, however, the new variant doesn't seem to be causing worse symptoms. This left many wondering whether they need to keep swabbing our nose passages with COVID tests at the first sign of congestion or achiness. How well do at-home rapid tests work against the new variant? Here's what to know. So the influenza and some cold viruses are circling along with COVID, so there are good reasons to know which viruses you got, particularly if you got higher risk of getting really sick. So quote here, it's important to know if you have COVID versus the flu versus something that's not viral at all, like strep throat, because they have different treatments, said Dr. Abrar Karan, an infectious disease physician at Stanford Medicine. They have different treatments, and the sooner you get treated, the better outcome you'll have. For a healthy 25-year-old, there is still some utility in getting tested. If somebody in the home has a weak immune system or is fighting cancer, for example, it's important to isolate if it's COVID. Quote, remember, for all these viruses or bacterial infections, contagiousness is different, and how sick you may get is different, Karan said. Joseph Petrosino, a chair of molecular biology and microbiology at Baylor College of Medicine, acknowledged that while it may not be as necessary for young, healthy people to take an at-home test, it may be helpful to know if it's COVID in case somebody ends up with lingering symptoms. Quote, there are healthy people, runners, or people who work out who do get long COVID as well, he said. Quote, you just really never know. It's hard to predict just based on comorbidity factors alone. Otherwise, for somebody who is low risk, getting a positive COVID test won't change much about treatment. Whether it's COVID, a cold, or flu, get plenty of rest, hydration, and stay away from others. So like I said, I did experience some symptoms, nothing major, just like congestion, runny nose. My throat was a bit scratchy, but nothing like I didn't have any body aches or any high temperatures, any fevers. And nobody, that I came into recent contact with had COVID. So my mom didn't have COVID, neither my sisters. So who knows what that was. But, I probably should have gotten a test. I don't know if you can still get a test to see whether or not I've been infected. But for the most part, I'm still feeling pretty okay. there's no lingering symptoms. I don't have any like fatigue or any brain fog. Or, like another factor, right, is the taste and, your smell, whether or not that's been dulled, that is working pretty okay. So who knows? Maybe I didn't have COVID, but, I did isolate as best as I could. And when I did go out in public, I wore a mask. So that's all I could do. And again, like I said, like I had to work. Like I had no other option. I had to work. So yeah, that's just what we're dealing with. Let's see here. Or any further details. Yeah, just reading at least on the new variant. So here, how does the new variant affect testing? There is no data that the JN1 variant should have any effect on the results of an at-home rapid test. Experts say, quote, "I have not seen anything to suggest that the newer variant have evaded detections on tests," said Karan. Certainly, this has happened in the past with other diagnostics earlier in the pandemic, but at this point, the tests should pick up these variants. Susan Butler-Wu, a clinical pathologist at Keck School of Medicine at the University of Southern California, said that while she hasn't seen data for this specific variant, if it's anything like other variants, it won't be an issue. Rapid tests actually look for a part of the virus that is less likely to mutate and dodge the tests. Quote, There's always this fear that we're going to have some mutation that's now going to make the test not work, but so far that's not really the case, said Butler. Yeah, so anyway, I mean, that's just at least the new details on this new variant. But yeah, every year it's going to mutate and going to change, and yeah, it's just kind of crazy to think about. Again, as I said, we Americans, we're very selfish people, and when we had an opportunity to unify and work together to ensure our public health and public safety, we blew it. We blew it because we're more focused on our own selfish needs to, go out, to party, to go to Applebee's or some other fucking overpriced, overrated joint. And again, like there's an increasing like opposition to like masks and vaccines that you see even among like some young people. It's really disturbing to see like again, the American public is like just turning into medieval peasants. Like that's just a level of ignorance that it's becoming more increasingly obvious. And of course, this has to do with our, decimation of public education. Again, being a historian, I had some recommendations to become a school teacher. Not that I'm opposed to that. I would very much love to be an educator. But when I look at, especially in Texas, the public education systems and the institutions and it doesn't give me much hope. It's just, I would much rather prefer to be an independent educator with a podcast or YouTube videos. That is much more up more my alley. I don't know, man. It's just, when I look at the corporate work life, the adult jobs, quote unquote adult jobs that supposed to apply towards, it just doesn't it's just not something that I want to do. Like I don't believe in it, and it's not worth the pay. It's not particularly good pay either. It's not worth the pay. And then the other thing too, like if you're going to be a school teacher in Texas, you have to make a pledge to not criticize Israel, which is fucking insane. And also, I don't want to have to deal with the Pledge of Allegiance every day. Like I'm not gonna. God, it's just like thinking about school again. I'm like, God. Not that, again, being a teacher, I would love to teach history and, social studies, but it's just like, you look at like what has become of public education and it's just like, no, I don't want to be involved in that. I don't want to be stuck in that. It's going to be a nightmare. And then of course, especially in Texas, the education curriculum is being politicized and all this critical race theory and such. It's just like, I don't want to be involved in that. Or if I do pursue a career in public education, it's not going to be in Texas. So, yeah. Although I don't even know where to start getting certification and such. Like, I don't even know. Like, it's just like, that's why I'm sticking with this, because this is what I know, and I'm just going to have to continue working with it. I don't know how to explain to them that I'm not going to continue with that corporate work life. again, even if I do attempt to apply, like nobody responds. Like my resume isn't the greatest. It took me 8 years to graduate college because I pretty much had like a nervous breakdown every semester. And then of course my family fell apart. So it's just like, I didn't have any stability, hardly any support. Thankfully, at least my mother, she never gave up on me, but a lot of other people did. I don't have amazing references and amazing resume. It's just like, again, like I said, my grandpa said to apply to CNN. It's just like it's just a complete disconnect, I just, and even then, like, I wouldn't even want to work there even if I could get in, because I'm just going to like lose my mind. Again, like the last like corporate, remote job that I had, with like customer service, just remote customer service, I would be sitting there for 8 hours and I'm just sitting here thinking, well, like this is a waste of my time. Like, I'm just like, anyway, I don't want to get off track. But yeah, this is at least, this is the first episode of the new year. The first episode, well, not the first, because last episode was the first, but yeah, this is a new stage in life, a new, step in this program, in my career, essentially, as an independent podcaster. Still going to have to work towards, researching it, different subjects. Like, I've gotten pretty, good progress on some subjects. Like I said, I was studying about the Great Depression and just some interesting details, especially about like, sanitation and public, health adjustments that were made, especially with like clean water, and that may have prevented the deaths of the Great Depression. Yeah, because, the whole idea that I want to do, at least with this documentary, is examine public health and mortality figures. And of course, what they're saying, at least, from my preliminary research, is that there wasn't a major decline in life expectancy. There wasn't major, mortality figures that occurred. So then the next step is, okay, why is that? Why is it that during one of the greatest economic crises of Western history, there wasn't a serious effect on mortality and life expectancy figures? And it has a lot to do with the public work efforts, relief efforts, the New Deal, the already like preceding decades where clean water technology were adopted. So it's a whole again, this is what it means to be a historian. You have to look at all these figures, all these like changes that occurred through the years and adjustments that occurred, reforms. Even though on the one hand, my objective is to see at least, how many people did die, when it's found that not that many people died, it wasn't like, anything dramatic, then the next step is, okay, then what was it that made it so that people didn't experience, massive casualties and mortality? So yeah, again, this is what I love to do. I love researching. I need to spend, like, I'm trying to like, manage it, have at least like a schedule, stay disciplined on it. But yeah, this is just like, it's fascinating to research it and then write it down. Or at least, right now it's just mainly like the citation phase, right? Just reading the articles and journals and then citing that properly. Then eventually I'll have to get into the actual writing and formatting and editing. So this is this is nice to, actually start, right, and read up on. And I'll have to see when I can get a video out on that. Probably will take me a couple months to actually research and, provide a script. But yeah, this is at least just, giving you at least an idea of the steps that I'm trying to take. And it's funny too, because like I also want to do more creative writing. So I'm gonna have to balance between like research and creative writing, and just doing my own projects now. Not being stuck to like a deadline and like having to be graded, but like producing my own work. So yeah, that is at least this episode, and just recent updates, and I'll keep an eye on new developments that occur. But I'm going to try, to be more consistent with these releases and follow everything that's unfolding. I mean, who knows? Like I said, I just was talking about the just like now, like attacks that are occurring in Iraq from the Iranian Guard. And let me read here actually, because they're already releasing certain figures. Let's see. So they said here that a Israeli, or I'm sorry, hold on. Okay, no, an Iraqi businessman. So Peshra Aga Dizayi, one of the richest men in Iraq, was killed. So that's some already some important figures are being affected by this. And again, yeah, as I said, also there's a developing situation in Egypt that is now having helicopter support. So that's fun. So again, things are escalating. Wow. So hopefully we'll see what happens. Okay, I don't want to get too hung up on this, but yeah, because I didn't want to say anything too much because it was unconfirmed. But yeah, there are some clashes occurring on the border with Egypt. Whether or not these are like, just like gunmen or actual Egyptian forces, that's still to be determined. But yeah, anyway, things are unfolding, right? Yeah, it's just crazy times that we're living in. And we'll have a better idea next time I record. I'm probably going to try to stick with 2 weeks, every 2 weeks releasing a video as best as I can. So not to have too much time between episodes. But yeah, anyway, I wanted to say thank you for tuning in. Greatly appreciate y'all's time and patience with me on these releases, and very much appreciate y'all's support. Again, I want to plug different social media, Twitter, Instagram, the YouTube, definitely follow those, and also the Patreon if you want to give me some monetary support, and also early access, because these episodes are they have ads, right? So if you want the early access without ads, then tune in to the Patreon, as little as $1 support. But yeah, I want to say thank you, and of course, it is pretty chilly. If you're listening in the US, it's pretty cold, so stay warm. Hopefully your power doesn't go out, but yeah. So thank you for tuning in. Love you guys, and I'll see you on the next one. Thank you.